Welcome to Chinese Novel Audio Wave, your go-to channel for captivating Chinese audiobooks. We bring you 2 daily uploads, ensuring you never miss a moment of the action. Stay tuned, subscribe, and let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1001 Heading to the Great Xia Dynasty. Pei Shihua was overjoyed when she saw it was Pei Tianlu. Pei Shihua originally thought that Pei Tianlu would eventually go to the King Yun dynasty to find the bodies of the 3 emperors. Even if he could not kill the 3 emperors, he would severely injure them. After all, their ancestors had such a personality. Not only their ancestors, but all the great emperors were very crazy before their time came. Pei Shihua did not expect to see their ancestor again. Just now she was immersed in grief, but she saw their ancestors so soon. Ancestor, great, you're okay. Pei Shihua finished speaking, and Pei Tianlu was about to say something. Suddenly, the dark power in his body violently overflowed again, and a voice kept echoing in Pei Tianlu's mind. You are about to die. Accept me and I will make you immortal and make you stronger. After feeling the overflowing power of darkness, Pei Tianlu quickly distanced himself from Pei Shihua. Seeing Pei Tianlu's painful look, Pei Shihua immediately flew towards Pei Tianlu. Ancestor, what's wrong with you? Pei Tianlu said quickly. Shihua, don't come over. Hearing Pei Tianlu's words, Pei Shihua was stunned for a moment and stayed in the void. At this time, Pei Tianlu quickly activated his spiritual power and tried to suppress the power of darkness in his body. Soon, the power of darkness was suppressed. Pei Tianlu breathed a sigh of relief and said to himself, it seems that time is running out. Then Pei Tianlu said to Pei Shihua, Shihua, which dynasty do you plan to go to next? Pei Shihua said, I don't know either. Pei Shihua used to focus on cultivation, but this was the first time she left the Xia dynasty. Although she had a certain understanding of the universe, that understanding came from other people. For a while, she was a little confused, not knowing where she should go. Where? Pei Shihua then asked, Ancestor, what are you going to do next? Pei Tianlu's end is approaching and he won't live much longer. If possible, Pei Shihua actually wants to die for Pei Tianlu. Pei Tianlu said, there is a strange power in my body. Anyone who is contaminated by this power, even the great emperor, will have his soul eroded. I plan to go to the edge of the universe or find a way to seal this power in the outside world. Pei Shihua instantly heard the implication of Pei Tianlu's words. Pei Tianlu planned to use his last life to seal that strange power. Pei Tianlu continued, Shihua, you'd better not go in the same direction as me. I can hardly suppress this dark power, and it may explode at any time. Pei Shihua pondered for a moment, and then said, Ancestor, if I go back now, I will probably be discovered by people sent by the King Yun dynasty. I plan to go to the Great Xia Dynasty to stay for a while, and then make plans after I recover my cultivation. Pei Tianlu thought for a moment, and then said, okay, then we will go to the Great Xia Dynasty together first. Pei Tianlu planned to talk to Pei Shihua about some of the secrets of the universe on the way to the Great Xia Dynasty, especially the outer realm and the great catastrophe of the universe, and finally teach Pei Shihua all the techniques he had learned in his life. In this way, he can die with peace of mind. In this way, Pei Tianlu and Pei Shihua went to the Great Xia Dynasty together. A few months later, Xia Dynasty. Lu Chen stood on the building of the Space Development Company, looking at the continuous anti-gravity speed cars below, and couldn't help feeling a little emotional. When he was on Earth, technology was not as developed as the current Xia Dynasty. Today, the technology of the Great Xia Dynasty has far exceeded that of the Earth at that time. When he left the Earth had not yet developed controllable nuclear fusion. However, the Industrial Revolution of the Great Xia Dynasty had just begun, and controllable nuclear fusion came out. As soon as the technology of controllable nuclear fusion came out, the development of the Great Xia Dynasty was like a rocket. The death worlds in the chaotic star sea before were restricted areas of life and had no value. Now, all the death worlds in the chaos star sea have become precious wealth. Although the death worlds have no life or aura, they are rich in mineral resources. Coupled with the technology of controllable nuclear fusion, the Universe Development Company has even planted vegetables on some dead worlds. Even Lu Chen felt that he could not keep up with the development of the Great Xia Dynasty. Looking at the students outside carrying school bags and flying swords to go to school, Lu Chen said to himself, I didn't expect that I, the person who started the Industrial Revolution, would now become an antique. At this moment, Bai Qingqing, wearing a silver-white armor, came to Lu Chen's side and said, Your Majesty, there is new information coming from the Red Moon Dynasty. Lu Chen turned to look at Bai Qingqing. Bai Qingqing's silver-white armor was tightly attached to her graceful figure. Her hair was tied into a single ponytail, revealing her pure white forehead. There was a red rope tied to her forehead, and her eyebrows were heroic. It's so cool, he looks so handsome. Seeing Bai Qingqing's outfit, Lu Chen smiled slightly. He was not the only one who was an antique. Nowadays, there are more and more modern clothes. Compared with cumbersome ancient clothes, most people are actually more willing to wear modern clothes. The same goes for most of Lu Chen's wives and concubines, especially silk clothes, such as black silk, which are their favorite. Of course, there are also people who prefer traditional clothes, and Bai Qingqing is one of them. Lu Chen has almost never seen Bai Qingqing wearing modern clothes. She is almost always dressed as a heroine, or she is wear armor. Bai Qingqing believed that as Lu Chen's bodyguard, her primary task was to protect Lu Chen. Although Lu Chen was stronger than her, she had to fulfill her duties as a bodyguard and should not wear too revealing and seductive clothes. The bodyguard had always been following Lu Chen. What if she continued to wear revealing and seductive clothes, which stimulated Lu Chen and made him think about sex all the time? At this time, Lu Chen took the psychic tablet from Bai Qingqing's hand, then opened the tablet and looked at the content of the email in his tablet. The times are developing too fast. In the past few years, intelligence was on paper, but now it has become direct email. After seeing the content in the email, Lu Chen fell into deep thought. The content in the email was exactly what happened recently in the Red Moon Dynasty. The Red Moon Dynasty is now controlled by the King Yun Dynasty, and the King Yun Dynasty has been looking for the escaped princess of the Red Moon Dynasty and the royal ancestor of the Red Moon Dynasty. Lu Chen thought to himself, it seems that trouble is coming again. From what the King Yun Dynasty did, it can be seen that the King Yun Dynasty was a relatively aggressive dynasty, and the King Yun Dynasty had 3 great emperors and was very powerful. If the King Yun Dynasty discovered the existence of the Xia Dynasty, it would be very likely to invade the Xia Dynasty. Thinking of this, Lu Chen immediately sent an email to the Jinyue, asking the Jinyue to send someone to the King Yun Dynasty to inquire about the movements of the King Yun Dynasty. Then Lu Chen handed the tablet to Bai Qingqing, and then took another look at Bai Qingqing's body, and said with a smile, Xiao Bai, you are still wearing armor in such a hot day, isn't it hot? Hearing Lu Chen's words, Bai Qingqing immediately understood what Lu Chen was going to do next, and then her cheeks couldn't help but blush slightly. Then Lu Chen pulled Bai Qingqing into his arms and returned to the palace with a teleportation. Just after returning to Bai Qingqing's room, Lu Chen was thinking about doing things, and suddenly the tablet in Bai Qingqing's hand made a prompt sound again. End of this chapter. Chapter 1002. Is this person the Xia Tiandi? Hearing the beeping of the tablet computer next to him, Lu Chen's thoughts were instantly extinguished in half. Bai Qingqing quickly apologized and said, Your Majesty, I should have turned off my phone. Lu Chen said, It's okay. There should be new information. Let's see what it is first. Bai Qingqing immediately opened the tablet and checked the email in the tablet. After reading the content of the email, she quickly handed the tablet to Lu Chen. Lu Chen glanced at the content of the email and frowned suddenly, his previous interest suddenly gone. Taiwan Novel Network. Jin Yiwei's information said that a powerful man with the level of an emperor was suspected of entering the Great Xia Dynasty. This matter was discovered by Emperor Huangshan. Originally, people didn't notice the emperor at first. After all, it was too easy for an emperor-level existence to hide its aura. But for some reason, the great emperor's aura suddenly leaked, and he was still exuding a strong death aura. Not to mention the quasi-emperor, even the saint monks could detect the strong death aura on his body. After realizing that the old man was a great emperor, the quasi-emperor of Huangshan immediately told Jin Yiwei the news, and Jin Yiwei also quickly chose to report it. Lu Chen thought in his mind, what kind of emperor came to the Great Xia Dynasty? Could it be Pei Tianlu and Pei Shihua? The intelligence he saw earlier mentioned that the King Yun dynasty was looking for the two of them, and it happened that an old man and a woman appeared in the Xia dynasty, and the old man was also a great emperor. After thinking for a moment, Lu Chen decided to go see these two people. It just so happened that he had a puppet clone in the Skyfire world, so he sent the puppet clone to have a look. Thinking of this, Lu Chen immediately sat on the bed, focused all his energy on the puppet, and controlled the puppet clone to go to the hotel mentioned in the intelligence. Fenjiu Hotel. An old man and a young woman were sitting by the window in the private room, quietly looking at the busy traffic outside the window. After a long while, Pei Shihua said, I didn't expect that the Great Xia Dynasty would be more prosperous than I imagined. Since entering the star territory of the Great Xia Dynasty, Pei Shihua and Pei Tianlu could only see shock in their eyes. Whether it was the weird things of the Great Xia Dynasty, or some of the management systems of the Great Xia Dynasty, especially the attitude of the Great Xia Dynasty towards mortals, they all found it incredible. Of course, what surprised them most was the prosperity of the Great Xia Dynasty. The Great Xia Dynasty was already close to the edge of the universe. The spiritual energy in this place was very thin. But even in this place, the prosperity of the Great Xia Dynasty was already high. Approached those dynasties in the central star field. Pei Shihua is now full of curiosity about the so-called Summer Emperor. She wants to know what kind of person he is who can have so many fantastic ideas and can make the remote star field in the universe so prosperous. Pei Tianlu picked up the strong wine on the table, poured a glass of wine, and then drank it with a grin. This summer is not easy for the emperor. Judging from the information we have obtained, he should only be at the level of the great emperor at most, and it is very likely that he has just broken through to the great emperor level. A person who has just broken through to the great emperor dares to call himself the emperor of heaven. This is not something ordinary people dare to do. The great emperor is divided into 9 levels, and above the great emperor is the heavenly emperor. Countless people want to take that step and become the heavenly emperor, but so far, there has not been a heavenly emperor in the entire universe. It is said that the emperor of heaven is the master of the universe. When the emperor of heaven appears in this universe, the path to immortality can be opened. Not everyone is qualified to be the lord of the universe. If anyone dares to claim to be the emperor of heaven, other emperors may attack the false emperor of heaven. Pei Tianlu didn't believe that a person who could develop the dynasty to such prosperity would be a stupid young man who didn't understand anything. Since he is not stupid, he still dares to call himself the emperor of heaven, which shows that he has absolute confidence in his own strength. Pei Shihua said worriedly at this time, he shouldn't be aware that we are coming to the Great Xia Dynasty, right? Pei Tianlu frowned and poured himself another glass of wine. He couldn't put down the wine from Xia Dynasty. This was the first time he drank such delicious wine. After drinking another glass of wine, Pei Tianlu said, the power of darkness in my body will rage from time to time. He may be able to sense the aura it emits. Maybe he already knows our existence. As soon as Pei Tianlu finished speaking, he heard a voice appear in the hotel room, it's great to have friends from far away. Welcome the 2 guests from the Xia Dynasty to the Great Xia Dynasty. Upon hearing this, Pei Shihua immediately stood up, and the breath from her body was released instantly. Lu Chen immediately said, "My friend, you are now in the mortal gathering area. Those mortals cannot withstand the pressure of your quasi-emperor." After Lu Chen finished speaking, Pei Tianlu quickly said to Pei Shihua, "Shihua, control your breath." Seeing Pei Tianlu say this, Pei Shihua calmed down, but she still observed her surroundings vigilantly. At this time, a figure slowly appeared in the private room. The person who came was wearing white clothes, with his hair tied in a single ponytail, and his hair was flying in the wind, giving him a bit of unruly and free-spirited look. Pei Shihua asked with a vigilant look, "May I ask who you are? Why do you appear in our private room?" Pei Shihua and Pei Tianlu could both sense that the man in front of them was only a 5th-level saint. Logically, they hid their aura. If the other party was only a 5th-level saint, it would be highly unlikely that they would be able to discover their identities. For some reason, the man in front of them always gave people a very strange feeling, as if he was a puppet. Lu Chen replied indifferently, "You two were just talking about me, and now you are asking who I am." Hearing Lu Chen's answer, Pei Tianlu and Pei Shihua were stunned. Is this the Xia Tiandi? How is this possible?" They thought that Xia Tiandi's strength was at the level of a great emperor no matter how strong it was. Although there were rumors in the Great Xia Dynasty that Xia Tiandi was only a saint, he was able to create a dynasty because he had a great emperor behind him. But as people of the dynasty, Pei Tianlu and Pei Shihua knew very well that the lord of the dynasty who could create a dynasty could only be a great emperor. If he was not a great emperor, he would not be recognized by the origin of the universe. A dynasty that is not recognized by the universe will soon bring about all kinds of disasters, but the Great Xia Dynasty is so prosperous now, and it is obvious that the Great Xia Dynasty has been recognized by the origin of the universe, so how could Emperor Xia Tian be just a saint? The two quickly reacted, could it be that Emperor Xia Tian hid his cultivation? As soon as this idea appeared in their minds, they denied this guess, because the Dao rhyme of a saint is different from the Dao rhyme of a great emperor, and the Dao rhyme emanating from the person in front of them is obviously the Dao rhyme of a saint. If he completely hides his breath, even the Dao rhyme is hidden, perhaps they will not be able to judge this person's cultivation for a while. But this person did not hide his breath at all, and with the Dao rhyme flowing on his body, they did not believe that they would be wrong. But how could a saint be Emperor Xia Tian? End of this chapter. Chapter 1003. I have an unwelcome request. After Pei Tianlu came to his senses, he smiled and said, "Young friend, are you kidding us? As far as I know, Emperor Xia's cultivation level is at least the first level of Great Emperor. How can he be a saint?" Lu Chen said, "Who told you that my cultivation level is the first level of the Great Emperor?" Pei Tianlu continued, "My little friend is really good at joking. If Emperor Xia was not the Great Emperor, how could he possibly create the Great Xia Dynasty? Don't you know that only the Emperor can create a dynasty?" Hearing Pei Tianlu's words, Lu Chen said, "I have indeed heard similar words." Since the influence of the Great Xia Dynasty expanded, Lu Chen has collected a lot of information about this universe. One of them is that only the Emperor can create a dynasty, otherwise it will not be recognized by the origin of the universe. Soon the entire dynasty will be destroyed by the universe. So Lu Chen himself was also curious as to why nothing happened to the Great Xia Dynasty after he founded it. He had two guesses. One guess was that he felt that all this was due to the system. Because of the existence of the system, he was able to create the dynasty. Another speculation is that the fact that non-emperors cannot create a dynasty is a rumor in itself. It may be a lie fabricated by those dynasties who do not want more dynasties to appear in this universe. After all, the more dynasties there are, the more luck will be distributed, which is not a good thing for those dynasties that already exist. Of course, all this is just Lu Chen's speculation. Lu Chen still hasn't figured out what exactly happened. Lu Chen continued at this time, but that rule does not apply to me. You must have seen how prosperous the Great Xia Dynasty was along the way. If that rule had an effect on me, the Great Xia Dynasty would have been destroyed long ago, and you would not be able to see the prosperity of the Great Xia Dynasty. This. Pei Tianlu and Pei Shihua were slightly stunned. They still couldn't believe that Lu Chen was Emperor Xia. At this time, Lu Chen's eyes fell on Pei Tianlu. Feeling the death energy and dark power on Pei Tianlu's body, Lu Chen's expression suddenly became serious. A similar power of darkness appeared in Chu Yukin's subworld, and the person with the power of darkness eventually turned into a demon. Lu Chen said at this time, "Old Senior is in some danger. If this power of darkness is not dealt with in time, I am afraid you will become a demon in a short time." Pei Tianlu and Pei Shihua were shocked when they heard Lu Chen's words. The next moment, their eyes were fixed on Lu Chen. They didn't expect that Lu Chen actually knew the power of darkness, and listening to his words, he seemed to have a special understanding of the power of darkness. After all, even they didn't know what would happen after being eroded by the power of darkness, but he directly said that Pei Tianlu would become a demon. After Lu Chen brought up the power of darkness, Pei Tianlu's view of Lu Chen changed regardless of whether Lu Chen was the emperor of Xia or not. Pei Tianlu then asked, "My little friend seems to have a special understanding of this kind of power." Lu Chen said, "I don't know him very well, I just met him before." Pei Tianlu made a gesture of invitation at this time, "My friend, can you sit down and talk in detail?" Lu Chen was not polite and went directly to sit opposite Pei Tianlu, while Pei Shihua stepped aside sensibly. After Lu Chen sat down, he took the initiative and asked, "I wonder where the power of darkness in my senior comes from." Pei Tianlu replied, "I'm not sure where it came from, but it's most likely related to the outside world." Hearing the word outland, Lu Chen instantly became interested and continued to ask, "Senior, can you tell me in detail what outland is?" Pei Tianlu said, "It is said that the outer realm is the boundary between another universe and this universe. Because it was created by the collision of two universes, the laws are very chaotic and extremely dangerous. Even the emperor of the 9th level may die at any time." Lu Chen said, "Senior, continue." Pei Tianlu continued, "There are many forbidden areas of life in the outer world, but almost no one who breaks in comes back alive. I accidentally broke into a restricted area of life, but fortunately I was only in the edge area. I survived by chance. However, since I came back from the outer realm, my body has been getting worse day by day, and I have also developed inner demons. This dark power also came after that. It just appeared in my body. So I think this dark power should come from the outside world." Lu Chen pondered for a moment. He still had no way to enter the outer realm, nor could he investigate the situation in the outer realm. After thinking about it, Lu Chen no longer struggled with the source of the power of darkness. "I see." Pei Tianlu asked at this time, "Why do you think that people who are corrupted by darkness will eventually become demons? Is it possible that I have seen it with my own eyes?" Lu Chen said, "Yes." This. After hearing Lu Chen's affirmative answer, Pei Tianlu's expression became a little ugly. He did not expect that he would eventually become the most hated demon among monks. Then if the power of darkness in his body spreads, wouldn't more and more people become demons? Thinking of this possibility, Pei Tianlu and Pei Shihua felt chills down their spines. They seemed to have discovered the origin of the demon. Pei Tianlu sighed and said, "It seems that I have to quickly go to the edge of the universe to seal this power." Pei Tianlu didn't want to become a sinner in this universe. At this time, Pei Tianlu looked directly into Lu Chen's eyes and asked, "My friend, are you really the emperor of the Great Xia Dynasty?" Lu Chen said, "Not now, the current emperor is my son." Pei Tianlu asked suspiciously, "Did you really create the Great Xia Dynasty?" Seeing that Pei Tianlu still didn't believe it, Lu Chen laughed and said, "Do you think that someone dares to pretend to be me in the Great Xia Dynasty? This. Pei Tianlu thought about it and felt that what Lu Chen said made some sense. The founder of the Great Xia Dynasty who pretended to be the emperor of the dynasty simply didn't want to live. It's just the fact that a saint can create a dynasty, they have never heard of it before. Pei Tianlu is now very curious, how can the origin of the universe recognize the Great Xia Dynasty? Lu Chen also saw that Pei Tianlu and Pei Shihua were still reluctant to believe, but he did not continue the topic of his identity. He said lightly at this time, judging from the concentration of death energy on the senior, I am afraid that the senior has at most 1 year. Lu Chen practiced the saint-level King Mu Chong Sheng Gong, so he was very sensitive to death energy. The death energy on Pei Tianlu almost filled the whole room. Pei Tianlu said, Your Majesty, I have an unwelcome request. I wonder if Your Majesty can agree. Pei Tianlu reluctantly believed Lu Chen's identity. Although he had not figured out why the Great Xia Dynasty was founded, he was too lazy to continue to entangle these issues. The most important thing now is Pei Shihua's personal safety. Lu Chen said, Senior, please speak. Pei Tianlu said, Can I let this person next to me stay in the Great Xia Dynasty for a while? After hearing Pei Tianlu's words, Lu Chen's eyes fell on Pei Shihua. Name, Pei Shihua. Identity, Princess of the Red Moon Dynasty, with the cultivation of a quasi-emperor. She fled the Red Moon Dynasty because of her failure in the power struggle. She plans to return for revenge after becoming an emperor. She is full of curiosity about everything in the Great Xia Dynasty, especially what kind of person Emperor Xia Tian is. Rating, 99. Favorability, 50, end of this chapter. Chapter 1004 What kind of power is this? Lu Chen used the system to identify Pei Shihua when he entered the hotel private room. He had been thinking about how to keep Pei Shihua from the beginning. Unexpectedly, Pei Tianlu actually took the initiative to mention this matter. After Lu Chen glanced at Pei Shihua, he said with a smile, Senior, you can rest assured that the eldest princess will stay in the Great Xia Dynasty. Are you not afraid that I will hand her over to your enemies? After all, there is only one great emperor in the Great Xia Dynasty, and he is no match for your enemies. Pei Tianlu did have worries about this in his heart, but his time was running out, and he could not continue to protect Pei Shihua now. Moreover, Pei Shihua has the boundary-breaking master he gave her. Even if Daxia really plans to hand her over to the King Yun dynasty, she can use the boundary-breaking pearl to escape. Pei Tianlu said, the fact that Daxia has developed so prosperously in a remote area of the universe shows that Your Majesty is not an ordinary person. I believe that with Your Majesty's ability, you will not be afraid of the King Yun dynasty. If Your Majesty is willing to help me with this, I can give you a precious gift of thanks. I believe that His Majesty will be interested in the inheritance left by a great emperor. Pei Tianlu is about to go to the edge of the universe, and the treasures on his body are of no use. He has already given important treasures to Pei Shihua, but a great emperor can accumulate a lot of treasures in his lifetime. The emperor would leave a legacy before he died, and he would do the same. He believed that Daxia would be interested in what he, the emperor, left behind. This deal is a very good deal for Daxia. Of course, Daxia may go back on his word, but Pei Tianlu doesn't have the time to think about it now. He believes that even if Daxia goes back on his word, Pei Shihua can protect himself. Hearing Pei Tianlu's words, Lu Chen just smiled and said immediately, if it were someone else, it is indeed possible that he would be interested in the inheritance of the emperor, but I am different from ordinary people. The inheritance of the emperor is of no use to me. This. Pei Tianlu couldn't believe what he heard. How could there be someone in this world who wasn't interested in the inheritance of the great emperor? Lu Chen continued, but I can agree to the senior's deal, but on a different condition. Pei Tianlu asked, what are the conditions? Lu Chen said calmly, I will help you eliminate the power of darkness in your body. From now on, you will protect the Great Xia Dynasty. For Lu Chen, the inheritance of an emperor is not as valuable as an emperor's thug. And leaving Pei Tianlu behind is equivalent to indirectly leaving behind Pei Shihua. Hearing Lu Chen's words, Pei Tianlu was stunned. He said with some excitement, "Impossible, how can you have a way to eliminate the power of darkness?" He, a great emperor, had used various methods but could not eliminate the strange dark power in his body. He did not believe that a saint could do it. Lu Chen said with a smile, "Senior can't do anything, doesn't mean I can't do anything either. Senior, all you have to do is say whether you are willing or not." Pei Tianlu was silent for a moment. If the power of darkness in his body could really be eliminated, then with the emperor's vitality, he would be able to survive for more than 1,000 years. And for him, protecting the Great Xia Dynasty is not a big deal, but in his opinion, this condition is a bit too easy. Then Pei Tianlu said, "Is it really as simple as just protecting the Great Xia Dynasty?" Lu Chen continued, "It's that simple. Of course, in order to ensure that Senior can keep his word, I need to plant a soul control seal on Senior before that." Pei Tianlu frowned. Although he didn't know what a soul-controlling seal was, just hearing the name, he knew it was not a good thing. Pei Tianlu then asked, "What is the soul control seal?" Lu Chen answered directly, "The soul control mark is similar to the method of controlling people with their natal essence and blood." Pei Tianlu said, "You should know that you cannot control the emperor with methods such as natal essence and blood. The length of the emperor's life has little to do with the physical body. The emperor's life is only related to the soul, so things like natal essence and blood cannot control the emperor's life and death." Lu Chen said, "This is just a similar method, but the actual effect is better than the life essence and blood." Hearing the conversation between Lu Chen and Pei Tianlu, Pei Shihua on the side said worriedly, "Ancestor, no." Although she also knew that the emperor was difficult to control, but what if the soul-controlling seal mentioned by Emperor Xia could control the emperor this time? She didn't want to see their ancestor turn into a walking zombie. Pei Tianlu said, "I have to say that for a dying person, extending life is indeed very attractive. If your majesty can really help me eliminate the power of darkness, it is not impossible for me to stay in the Great Xia Dynasty and protect the Great Xia Dynasty for the rest of my life. When people are about to die, the Red Moon Dynasty is no longer that important to Pei Tianlu. And for him, his current mission is to eliminate the power of darkness." After learning that the power of darkness can turn people into demons, Pei Tianlu understood how much disaster this power would bring to the entire universe. He didn't want to become a sinner in the universe when he was about to die. Although he initially planned to use his own life to seal this dark power, no one could tell whether he would be able to seal this power, and whether this power would spill out after his death. If Emperor Xia really has the ability to eliminate the power of darkness, letting him stay in the Great Xia Dynasty is nothing. Lu Chen said, "So, Senior has agreed." Pei Tianlu said, "Anyway, I am going to die soon. Does His Majesty think I have any other choice?" Lu Chen said, "Since Senior has agreed, let's get started." "Senior, relax your mind." As he spoke, Lu Chen's consciousness directly entered Pei Tianlu's Sea of Soul. Pei Tianlu was stunned when he felt Lu Chen's consciousness invading. He didn't expect that a small saint could enter his Sea of Soul so easily. Pei Tianlu tried to calm the spiritual power in his body and relaxed his mind as Lu Chen said. Seeing that Pei Tianlu's mind was completely open, Lu Chen was about to use the soul control seal, and suddenly a black mist appeared in Pei Tianlu's soul. "Who dares to invade my soul? I haven't eaten for a long time, hee, let me swallow you." Seeing the black mist, Lu Chen laughed. At this time, the death energy on Pei Tianlu suddenly surged. Seeing this scene, Pei Shihua was extremely nervous. She knew that if Pei Tianlu had any problems now, the dark power in Pei Tianlu's body would probably spread out. At that time, not only her, but the entire Great Xia Dynasty would be eroded by the dark power. Thinking of the countless demons that were produced after the Great Xia Dynasty was eroded by the dark power, Pei Shihua became more and more anxious. Feeling that the black fog was getting closer and closer to him, Lu Chen immediately activated the Chaos Demon killing skill. Before the black fog got close to Lu Chen's consciousness, it was burned by the white power released by Lu Chen's consciousness and cried to the sky. No! What kind of power is this? Why can it hurt me? Let me go, I can give you immortality. Seeing the black fog howling like a ghost, Pei Tianluo was stunned. He never thought that the inner demon that had been bothering him would have such a day. End of this chapter. Chapter 1005 really dispelled. Hearing what the black fog said, Lu Chen was disdainful. The black fog exuded a strong power of the devil, which was already a seed of the devil. Lu Chen could not let it go. However, Lu Chen was not in a hurry to destroy the black fog. If he destroyed the black fog before planting the soul-controlling seal, Pei Tianluo would probably recover. If Pei Tianluo regretted it, wouldn't he lose more than he gained? Lu Chen then cast a spell again, leaving the soul-controlling seal in Pei Tianluo's soul. When the soul-controlling seal appeared, Pei Tianluo immediately understood the horror of the soul-controlling seal. Using the essence of one's own life to control a person can only threaten the controlled person with life, but the soul-controlling seal is different. The soul-controlling seal controls a person mentally, making the controlled person unable to resist the caster. Although he understood the horror of the soul-controlling seal, Pei Tianluo still did not regret it in his heart, because he had just seen that Lu Chen was indeed capable of hurting his inner demon. Moreover, a saint has the means to control the emperor and even eliminate the power of darkness. This can only mean that the power behind this person is not simple. Perhaps it is not all bad for him to follow this so-called Xia Tiandi. After the soul control seal was performed, Lu Chen opened his eyes. Seeing Lu Chen open his eyes, Pei Shihua hurriedly asked, "Ancestor, how are you?" She is now afraid that Pei Tianluo will become a walking corpse. Pei Tianluo did not answer Pei Shihua's question, but looked at Lu Chen and said, "The master's means are all-powerful, and the old slave admires it." Seeing Pei Tianluo call himself old slave, Pei Shihua felt very complicated. She did not expect that the ancestor of their Red Moon dynasty has now fallen to serve others as the master. Thinking of this, Pei Shihua felt extremely desolate in her heart. The universe is indeed as cruel as the old ancestor said, where the weak are eaten by the strong. Lu Chen said at this time, "It's better not to call me master. This is just a precautionary measure. From now on, you will be the worshipper of the Great Xia royal family." Lu Chen has some misophobia. He prefers his woman to call him master. When he thought of an old man calling him master, Lu Chen felt uncomfortable. Pei Tianluo reacted instantly, "I understand." Lu Chen continued, "The next step is to clear the dark power in your body." I don't know if it was because of Lu Chen's words, the dark power in Pei Tianluo's body immediately became agitated, and Pei Tianluo's eyeballs turned completely black at this moment. Because Pei Shihua was close to Pei Tianluo, she was also affected by this dark power. The next moment, a voice kept echoing in her mind. "This is a despicable villain who takes advantage of others' misfortune. Kill him." Pei Shihua immediately understood what was going on. She quickly distanced herself from Pei Tianluo, and then circulated her spiritual power, trying to calm the agitated spiritual power in her body and suppress the influence of the inner demon on herself. After suppressing the inner demon, Pei Shihua's eyes fell on Lu Chen again. She frowned and doubted whether Lu Chen had the ability to expel the dark power. At this time, Lu Chen still looked calm and didn't seem to worry about the dark power spilling out. What surprised Pei Shihua was that he, a quasi-emperor, was more or less affected by the dark power, but Lu Chen, a saint, looked like nothing happened. This made Pei Shihua wonder, could he really expel the dark power? Just when Pei Shihua was distracted, Lu Chen slowly raised his hand, and then a colorful light power entered Pei Tianlu's body. As soon as the spiritual power of chaos demon slaying art entered Pei Tianlu's body, the death energy on Pei Tianlu's body dissipated by more than half. At the same time, Lu Chen raised his other hand. A green power came out of that hand, and the green power touched Pei Tianlu's body. Pei Tianlu's body recovered visibly, and the death energy dissipated faster and faster. Seeing the changes in Pei Tianlu, Pei Shuhua was immediately stunned by Lu Chen's methods. In order to let Pei Tianlu live longer, they had thought of all methods, but none of them worked. However, Lu Chen, a saint, was able to restore Pei Tianlu's vitality in an instant. Is this really something a saint can do? In this way, Lu Chen really has the possibility to cure their ancestor. Time passed by, and as Lu Chen's spiritual power traveled through Pei Tianlu's body, Pei Tianlu's originally old body became much younger, and even the wrinkles on his face were much less. However, at this time, the dark power in Pei Tianlu's body was still not cleared. Feeling that the dark power was running around in Pei Tianlu's body, trying to avoid his spiritual power, Lu Chen laughed. He didn't expect that just a force could know how to escape. This power may have given birth to spiritual intelligence. It seems that Pei Tianlu's inner demon is not completely an inner demon. Maybe this dark power disguised as Pei Tianlu's inner demon. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audio Wave. But this is nothing to him. You like to hide, right? Then let the chaos demon slaying art's spiritual power spread all over Pei Tianlu's body and see how the dark power can hide. Then, Lu Chen increased the intensity of the removal. Pei Tianlu's face also became a little distorted at this moment. The dark power seemed to see Lu Chen's intention, so it increased its temptation to Pei Tianlu, wanting Pei Tianlu to get rid of Lu Chen. But Pei Tianlu still held on. After a while, the dark force saw that it could not bewitch Pei Tianlu, so it escaped from Pei Tianlu's body. Seeing the dark force escaping from Pei Tianlu's body, Lu Chen's mouth corners slightly raised, and he finally forced this guy out of Pei Tianlu's body. It will be much easier next time. Then, Lu Chen raised his hand, and a ball of colorful purifying power completely wrapped up the dark force. When the purifying power came into contact with the dark force began to dissolve rapidly. However, at this moment, something Lu Chen did not expect happened. The dark force actually gathered into a villain, struggling and shouting, "I will tear you into pieces. Wait, your universe will soon usher in the end. The Lord of the Demon will avenge me." Hearing the words of the black villain, Lu Chen was stunned for a moment. As he thought, this dark force was no longer a simple dark force, but a power with spiritual wisdom. I never thought that one day power would also generate intelligence. However, even if this dark power gave birth to intelligence, it still could not resist the power of the 7 colors of purification. In just a moment, the dark power was completely dissolved. And the death energy on Pei Tianlu's body also completely dissipated. Feeling that his body suddenly became very relaxed, Pei Tianlu excitedly saluted Lu Chen and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." At this time, Pei Shuhua was completely stunned in the same place. After a while, she murmured, "Really, dispelled." End of this chapter. Chapter 1006. Your Majesty, please call me Shuhua. The power of darkness, which not even an emperor could do anything about, was actually dispelled by a saint. Pei Shuhua even wondered if she was dreaming. But it really happened right in front of my eyes. The most important thing is that Lu Chen not only helped their ancestor dispel the power of darkness, but also restored their ancestor's vitality. It stands to reason that even if the power of darkness in their ancestor's body is removed, their ancestor's soul has been severely damaged and it will be very difficult to recover. But these didn't seem to be difficult at all in front of Emperor Xia Tian. Is this really what a saint can do? After Lu Chen finished treating Pei Tianlu, he turned around and glanced at Pei Shuhua, and then said, "Okay, now that the treatment is over, it's time for me to leave." You can get familiar with the Great Xia Dynasty, and I will come back to you after a while. As soon as the words fell, Lu Chen's body disappeared on the spot. After Lu Chen left, Pei Shihua quickly walked up to Pei Tianlu and asked, "Ancestor, how do you feel physically?" Pei Tianlu replied, "It has never been better." Speaking of this, Pei Tianlu sighed, "There is no end to the road. I didn't expect that in such a remote star field, there is someone who can eliminate the power of darkness, and the other person is just a saint." Hearing Pei Tianlu's words, Pei Shihua said with a worried look, "But what kind of soul control technique has he used on you, ancestor?" After seeing Lu Chen's methods, Pei Shihua now has no doubt whether Lu Chen's soul control technique can be useful to a great emperor. That man could even remove the power of darkness that the great emperor could not control. It did not seem impossible for him to control a great emperor. Pei Tianlu saw Pei Shihua's worries, so he said, "Shihua, maybe this is not necessarily a bad thing, it is more likely to be our opportunity. He can even remove the power of darkness, and he can also restore me to life. Do you think he will be an ordinary person?" Pei Shihua also understands this truth, but she still has some grudges in her heart. If Lu Chen just asked Pei Tianlu to guard the Great Xia Dynasty and didn't use soul control skills on Pei Tianlu, then she wouldn't think anything of it. After all, this was just a deal between you and me. But after using the soul control technique, their ancestor became a slave of one person. As a descendant of Pei Tianlu, she always felt a little uncomfortable in her heart. Pei Tianlu also knew that Pei Shihua could not accept it for a while, so he did not continue this topic. "Now that I have recovered, let's take a good tour of the Great Xia Dynasty. I believe that the Great Xia Dynasty can bring us more surprise." In the next month, Pei Tianlu and Pei Shihua traveled throughout the Great Xia Dynasty and experienced all kinds of new things in the Great Xia Dynasty. After visiting the entire Xia Dynasty, Pei Shihua's realm actually became a little looser. Pei Shihua immediately told Pei Tianlu about the incident. Pei Tianlu felt that he was almost done shopping, so he took Pei Shihua to Tianchen World to meet Lu Chen. Tianchen World, Black Dragon City Palace. Unzengxian's Palace. From time to time, there were loud voices in the palace, and the maids at the door of the palace all blushed. Although they have heard this kind of melodious music countless times, they can't help but think wildly every time they hear it. After all, Emperor Xia was not only handsome and graceful, but he was also the most powerful person in the entire Great Xia Dynasty. How could that girl not have any thoughts about him? The maids around Lu Chen's wives and concubines are basically women above 80% and below 90%, and they are also those at the level of sex saints outside. It's a pity that these maids are destined to have no chance. After all, Lu Chen has a lot of wives and concubines, and he is already too busy. How could he attack these maids? If Lu Chen didn't even spare the maid, he would probably be even more busy. At this time, in the palace, Lu Chen was working hard to clear Yungxian's meridians. The two of them are an old couple, and Yun Xianxian now doesn't know how to hold back in front of Lu Chen, and will howl out when it's time to do so. Of course, Lu Chen didn't think there was anything wrong with Yungxian just because Yungxian howled loudly. On the contrary, the more confused Yungxian appeared, the more sense of accomplishment he felt in his heart. After all, Yun Xianxian used to be a high-ranking fairy, but now she was dragged into the mortal world by herself and was kept submissive by herself. At this time, Lu Chen's voice sounded in the palace, "Master, has my disciple's strength increased a lot?" Hearing this question, Yun Xianxian just snorted and said nothing. Of course she knew what kind of strength Lu Chen was talking about. Seeing Yun Xianxian's unwillingness to answer him, Lu Chen became a little violent in his heart, but just when he was about to give Yun Xianxian more strength, Bai Qingqing's voice sounded at the door. "Your Majesty, Pei Tianlu and Pei Shihua would like to see you." After hearing Bai Qingqing's words, Lu Chen slapped Yun Xianxian on the buttocks, and then said, "I will let you go today." When the disciple's work is finished, I will let the master feel the disciple's strength. Yun Xianxian rolled her eyes at Lu Chen and said nothing. If she spoke at this time and accidentally irritated him, he might not get up again. Afterwards, Lu Chen took some time to tidy up his clothes, then left Yungxiangxian's palace and met Pei Tianlu and Pei Shuhua in the imperial study. When Lu Chen entered the imperial study, he noticed that Pei Shuhua's aura had increased a lot, and there were signs of a breakthrough. This made Lu Chen feel a little worried. If Pei Shuhua had broken through and become the emperor, she would probably leave the Great Xia Dynasty, and the 90-point woman he had finally met would be gone again. I don't know if Pei Tianlu's existence would allow Pei Shuhua to continue to stay in the Great Xia Dynasty. After Lu Chen came to his senses, he asked, "Old Pei, do you have anything to do?" Seeing Lu Chen enter the imperial study, Pei Shuhua and Pei Tianlu saluted at the same time and said, "Your Majesty." After saluting, Pei Tianlu said, "Your Majesty, Shuhua's realm has loosened now, and there are signs of a breakthrough. I want her to stay in the Tianchen world for retreat. I wonder if your Majesty can agree." Pei Tianlu found out when he entered the Tianchen world that the concentration of the Tianchen world was far higher than that of the Red Moon world. Pei Tianlu didn't want to explore why there was such a strong spiritual world in the wild area of the universe. After all, a mysterious person like Lu Chen was in such a remote star field, and he would not be surprised by what happened in the chaotic star sea. He just wanted Pei Shuhua to break through and become the emperor. If she retreated in the Tianchen world, Pei Shuhua's chance to comprehend the Great Way would become easier. Lu Chen's eyes fell on Pei Shuhua, and he said with a smile, "Of course, I will arrange a training room for the princess." Hearing Lu Chen call her the princess, Pei Shuhua hurriedly said, "Your Majesty, now I have left the Red Moon Dynasty and am no longer the princess of the Red Moon Dynasty. Your Majesty should still call me Shuhua." End of this chapter. Chapter 1007. We are all family, no need to be polite. Pei Shuhua knew her situation very well. She didn't have the temperament of a princess. She had to bow her head when she was under the eaves. What's more, they owed Lu Chen a huge favor, so she kept her attitude low in front of Lu Chen. Lu Chen looked at Pei Shuhua's beautiful eyes and said, "Okay, but calling me Shuhua is a bit too intimate and inappropriate. I will call you Miss Pei from now on." Hearing what Lu Chen said, Pei Shuhua also realized that it was indeed a bit too intimate for Lu Chen to call him by his first name. After all, they had just come into contact. But she didn't really care about that. Lu Chen continued at this time, "I have prepared a secret training room for Miss Pei, which is located in the palace." This. Pei Shuhua said, "Your Majesty, the palace is where the royal family lives. There is something wrong with me living in the palace." Pei Shuhua became vigilant for a moment. During this period, she and their ancestors traveled throughout the Great Xia Dynasty, and they already had a certain understanding of Lu Chen. It is said that Lu Chen is a very lustful person, all of his wives and concubines are stunning, and he is particularly tough. The women he likes will eventually be taken into his harem. Even his master did not escape Lu Chen's clutches in the end. Pei Shuhua vaguely noticed that Lu Chen had ulterior motives for her. Lu Chen said at this time, "The place with the strongest spiritual energy in Tianchen world is in the Imperial Palace. It is better to practice in the Imperial Palace and the possibility of breakthrough is greater." This. Pei Shuhua fell into silence and did not answer. At this time, Pei Tianlu also realized Lu Chen's purpose, but he couldn't say much now. As Pei Shuhua's ancestor, he naturally did not want to see his descendants being persecuted, but now that he had been planted with a soul-controlling mark by Lu Chen, he could not betray Lu Chen. When Pei Shuhua was silent, Lu Chen said with a smile, "If Miss Pei is unwilling, I can have someone arrange another suitable training place for Miss Pei." Pei Shuhua came to her senses and said directly, "No, I will practice in the palace." Pei Shuhua thought in her heart that when she became the emperor, Even if Lu Chen wanted to do something to him, it would not be that easy. Moreover, Lu Chen had just saved her ancestor not long ago, so it would be inappropriate if she fell out with Lu Chen now. In addition, their ancestor was now controlled by Lu Chen, and it would be difficult for their ancestor to be caught in the middle. She planned to listen to Lu Chen's words first, and then think of a way to see if she could do it after she became the great emperor. Remove the soul controlling mark from her ancestor. Lu Chen said, I will ask someone to take Miss Pei to the training room. If Miss Pei needs anything in the future, you can tell the maids in the palace and let them prepare. Pei Shuhua saluted and said, Thank you, Your Majesty. Lu Chen smiled lightly and said, We are all our own people, so you're welcome. Hearing this, Pei Shuhua had a complicated expression on her face, although after entering the Great Xia Dynasty, she kept her figure very low. But after all, she used to be the eldest princess of the Xia Dynasty, and now she felt very uncomfortable being dependent on others and being humbled. In this world, strength is respected after all. At this moment, Pei Shuhua's Taoist heart became stronger. She must become the Taoist emperor and become stronger. At this time, Lu Chen sent a message to the maid, and soon several maids wearing long skirts and maid outfits appeared at the door of the royal study. Lu Chen was stunned when he saw the clothes of these maids. Lu Chen asked directly, What's wrong with the clothes you are wearing? The head maid replied, Your Majesty, this is what concubine Mu asked us to wear. Lu Chen reacted instantly. A few days ago, he asked Mu Zixuan to select a few maids and prepare them. He had arrangements in the next few days. Mu Zixuan might have thought that these maids were going to serve him, so he asked them to change into maid uniforms. As the first woman to follow Lu Chen, Mu Zixuan knew very well what Lu Chen liked. When Lu Chen and Mu Zixuan were together, he often asked her to wear such clothes. Lu Chen coughed, and then said, From now on, you will serve this girl next to me. In addition, your clothes will also be changed into old costumes. After all, Pei Shuhua just came to the Great Xia Dynasty, and Lu Chen didn't want Pei Shuhua to think that he was a pervert. The head maid took the lead in saluting and said, Yes, Your Majesty. At this time, the head maid asked, I wonder how we should call this girl, Your Majesty. Lu Chen continued, You can just call her Miss Pei. The head maid and several maids then saluted Pei Shuhua, I have met Miss Pei. Pei Shuhua glanced at the clothes worn by these maids and felt that these clothes were very beautiful. During this period of the Great Xia Dynasty, in addition to the weird technological products that interested Pei Shuhua, the clothes of the Great Xia Dynasty also made Pei Shuhua very interested. She also bought a lot of clothes herself, but because the ancestor Pei Tianlu was around, she didn't wear those clothes. Lu Chen turned to look at Pei Shuhua and continued, Miss Pei, why don't you follow them to see your secret training room now? If you don't like it, I can have someone change it for you. Having said this, Lu Chen said to the chief maid, Take Miss Pei to Fenghua Palace. Pei Shuhua glanced at Pei Tianlu, and then left with the maids. After Pei Shuhua left, Pei Tianlu said, Thank you, Your Majesty, for allowing Shuhua to stay in the palace for retreat and breakthrough. Although he knew what Lu Chen was thinking, he had to lower his head under the eaves, and Pei Tianlu had nothing to do now. Lu Chen's origin is unknown and his background should not be simple. In addition, Pei Tianlu has a soul-controlling seal in his body. Even if he knew that Lu Chen had evil intentions towards Pei Shuhua, he could only thank Lu Chen. But then again, if Pei Shuhua also likes Lu Chen, this might be a good thing. It is said that Lu Chen is very kind to his wives and concubines. Lu Chen's wives and concubines can go wherever they want. During this period of time in Great Xia, Pei Tianlu and Pei Shuhua went to many worlds run by Lu Chen's wives and concubines, so they also I heard some stories about Lu Chen and his wives. In the eyes of the common people, although Emperor Xia was carefree, he was a responsible person. Moreover, he basically supports whatever his wives and concubines want to do, which is why Lu Chen's wives and concubines also have many properties. Hearing Pei Tianlu's words, Lu Chen smiled and then said, "That's not what Mr. Pei thinks in his heart." Seeing that Lu Chen had exposed him, Pei Tianlu felt a little embarrassed, and he didn't know what to say. Lu Chen continued, "Don't worry, if Miss Pei breaks through and becomes the Great Emperor and wants to leave the Great Xia Dynasty, I will not stop her." Lu Chen thought to himself that if she really broke through and became the Great Emperor, he might not have the strength to stop her. And he didn't want to completely offend her. After all, she was a woman with a score of over 90, and there was a high probability that she had something to do with him in her previous life. Ever since Lu Chen suspected that women with scores over 90 were related to him in their previous lives, Lu Chen no longer planned to use strong tactics. End of chapter. Chapter 1008. Is it really not possible? Pei Tianlu felt a little bit unbelievable when he heard Lu Chen's words. During this time in the Great Xia Dynasty, they heard a lot about Lu Chen. It is rumored that any woman who is favored by Lu Chen and enters the palace will eventually become Lu Chen's woman. The Great Xia Dynasty is different from other dynasties. Other dynasties strictly prohibit discussing the emperor's affairs, but in the Great Xia Dynasty, people often brag about the great achievements of Emperor Xia Tian on the street. Including the fact that Lu Chen conquered beauties from all sides, it is also a thing worth bragging about in the eyes of ordinary people. Pei Tianlu really doubts whether Lu Chen will let Pei Shihua leave the Great Xia Dynasty at that time. In addition to being beautiful, Pei Shihua is also very talented. She can cultivate to the quasi-emperor realm in less than 5,000 years, which is very rare in the entire universe. In Pei Tianlu's opinion, even if Emperor Xia Tian does not like Pei Shihua's appearance, he is likely to keep her because of Pei Shihua's cultivation talent. Lu Chen knew that Pei Tianlu didn't believe him at this time. On the matter of lust, his image in the hearts of all the people of the Great Xia Dynasty was basically the same, so it was useless for him to say anything. He didn't care. When Pei Shihua broke through and became the emperor, Pei Tianlu would know whether what he said was true. At this time, Lu Chen thought of something and looked at Pei Tianlu and said, "Old Pei, where do you plan to live?" Pei Tianlu said, "I can live anywhere. But Shihua wants to prove her way and retreat, so it's better for me to stay in Black Dragon City. If she encounters any problems when she crosses the tribulation, I can help her at the first time." Lu Chen said, "Okay, I'll have someone arrange a house for you, Old Pei." Then Lu Chen sent a message to the Jinyue, asking them to find a quiet house as Pei Tianlu's residence. Pei Tianlu bowed and said, "Your Majesty, if there is nothing else, I will not bother you." "Okay, when the house is selected, I will let the Jinyue tell you." "Of course, if you have a favorite residence, you can also tell the Jinyue." Pei Tianlu said, "I would like to thank your Majesty first." "Don't be so polite. You are also a tribute to the royal family of Daxia. If you need anything in the future, you can also tell me." "Thank you, your Majesty, for your kindness. I will take my leave." Lu Chen nodded and said nothing more. Pei Tianlu turned around and left the imperial study. At the same time, Pei Shihua and a group of maids came to Fenghua Palace. After entering Fenghua Palace, Pei Shihua asked, "Where did you buy the clothes you are wearing?" The head maid replied, "This is a piece of clothing made by the clothing bureau not long ago. It has not been mass-produced yet. It is said that it was designed by your Majesty." Hearing this, Pei Shihua felt a little incredible. Such beautiful clothes were actually designed by Lu Chen? Lu Chen, the founder of the dynasty, is so idle every day that he can design clothes for women? Your Majesty can also design clothes for women? Pei Shihua asked curiously. The head maid replied, "Yes, most of the popular clothing styles in the Great Xia Dynasty are designed by your Majesty. At the beginning, these clothes were only worn by the nobles in the palace. If the response is good, the clothing bureau will mass-produce these clothes and sell them to the people of Great Xia. Pei Shihua thought to herself that Lu Chen, the lord of the dynasty, was indeed different from other lords of the dynasty. This was the first time she heard of a lord of the dynasty designing clothes for women. Although Lu Chen had already given up the position of lord of the dynasty to his children, he was the founder of the dynasty after all and had absolute power in his hands. It was strange for a person with absolute power to do such a thing. Pei Shihua was suddenly stunned. So, the clothes she liked were basically designed by Lu Chen? Especially those underwear. How much experience does this lustful man have to design such clothes? However, when she thought that this lecher had so many wives and concubines, Pei Shihua felt relieved. At this time, the head maid walked to a wall in the hall and said, "Miss Pei, this is the secret room for cultivation." As she spoke, the head maid controlled the formation and opened the entrance passage, and a downward entrance appeared in front of Pei Shihua. The moment the tunnel appeared, Pei Shihua felt a thicker spiritual energy surging out from it, and these spiritual energy had turned into substantial clouds and mist. Pei Shihua was slightly stunned. With such a thick spiritual energy, could it be that there is a spiritual stone vein under the Black Dragon City? Pei Shihua didn't think much about it and walked directly towards the underground passage. When she entered the underground passage, she saw a huge underground palace with many rooms around it. The underground palace had already seen the spiritual energy turning into liquid, and Pei Shihua was slightly excited. If she practiced in seclusion in such a place, the possibility of her becoming an emperor would become greater. When becoming an emperor, you need a lot of spiritual energy. If you don't have enough spiritual energy, it is likely to lead to a failure in breaking through. In addition, you also need a lot of spiritual energy when you cross the tribulation. It must be said that Lu Chen's palace is indeed a good place for a breakthrough. At this time, the head maid said, "Miss Pei, if you need anything, please tell us by voice transmission, and we will withdraw first." Pei Shihua said indifferently, "Okay." After the voice fell, Pei Shihua found a stone room for cultivation and prepared to practice in seclusion. However, at this moment, suddenly a huge spiritual power spread out from the palace, like a stone falling into the water, causing ripples. Pei Shihua frowned. This spiritual power was very violent, even mixed with complex Tao rhyme. Pei Shihua suddenly realized that someone was proving the Tao to be an emperor. I didn't expect that the Great Xia Dynasty would have another emperor so soon. If the person who was proving the Tao successfully broke through and became an emperor, then the Great Xia Dynasty would not have to worry about the King Yun Dynasty coming to the door. However, when Pei Shihua was distracted for a moment, the spiritual power suddenly collapsed and the Tao rhyme also dissipated. Pei Shihua said to herself, "What a pity. Obviously, that person failed to prove the Tao." Lu Chen in the imperial study also sensed that the Tianhong female emperor failed to prove the Tao. He didn't know whether he should comfort her. After thinking about it, Lu Chen decided not to touch the bad luck. After all, Empress Tianhong was an empress in her previous life, so her mentality was not so fragile. She just failed once. However, Empress Tianhong's condition at this time was obviously not as good as Lu Chen thought. Her face was flushed, her whole body was sweating, her red gauze skirt was soaked with sweat, and her hair on her forehead was wet and stuck together by sweat. After Empress Tianhong opened her eyes, she looked at the red line wrapped around her body and murmured, "It really doesn't work." Empress Tianhong knew very well where the problem was. She had expected the possibility of failure at the beginning, but she was still unwilling to believe that she had to do that, so she tried to break through by force. Unfortunately, reality still slapped her in the face. She was stained with a lot of Lu Chen's karma, and was tightly entangled by Lu Chen's marriage line. If she did not become Lu Chen's woman and did not repay the karma, she would not be able to achieve a clear mind. End of this chapter. Chapter 1009, Queen Tianhong, what did you do? For the Tianhong Empress, sex is really nothing. For a great emperor like her who has lived for who knows how many tens of thousands of years, the moral sense in her heart has almost disappeared. The reason why she is unwilling to do that kind of thing with Lu Chen is that she feels that it is an insult to her as a great emperor. The great emperor cannot be insulted. She feels a little disgusted when Lu Chen rides on her, especially when Lu Chen treats her like his wives and concubines. There is no way. As a great emperor, her perception is too strong. After following Lu Chen, she basically knows all the dirty things Lu Chen does. Letting a great emperor be someone else's plaything is more uncomfortable than killing her. She even doubts whether her Tao heart will collapse directly if she is really confronted by Lu Chen. But in this situation, if nothing happens with Lu Chen, I am afraid there is really no way to break through and become a great emperor. For her, breaking through to the realm of the great emperor is only the first step. Her goal is the higher realm of the emperor, or even the legendary immortal. If she can't even cross the first step, let alone become a heavenly emperor or an immortal. After much thought, Empress Tianhong made a bold decision. What she couldn't accept in her heart was that Lu Chen treated her as a toy for venting. As long as she changed her mindset and treated Lu Chen as her toy, it would be fine. Although Lu Chen's identity and origin were very mysterious, Lu Chen was only at the Saint realm now. With her cultivation at the Quasi-Emperor realm, it was very easy for her to suppress Lu Chen and take the initiative. After making a decision in her heart, Empress Tianhong didn't hesitate at all. She raised her hand and the sweat on her body dissipated. She changed into a new set of clothes. The next moment, her body disappeared on the spot. At the same time, Lu Chen was still thinking about how to walk the path of the emperor in the imperial study room without breaking through and failing. When he was distracted, a figure of unparalleled elegance appeared in front of him. Seeing Empress Tianhong, Lu Chen was stunned for a moment. Empress Tianhong had just failed to break through, so why did she come to him? Shouldn't she stabilize her cultivation to avoid a setback caused by a failure to break through? Lu Chen asked with a smile, "Hong Hong, why are you here?" The Empress Tianhong had no expression on her face and did not speak. She waved her hand and the two figures disappeared from the imperial study. When they appeared again, they had already arrived at the Empress Tianhong's bedroom. Even though Empress Tianhong brought him to her bedroom, Lu Chen was even more curious about what Empress Tianhong would do next. Before Lu Chen could say anything, he felt his body being restrained by a force, and then his body flew to Empress Tianhong's soft couch. Lu Chen was stunned for a moment. Then his clothes burst open, and Empress Tianhong stood by the soft couch and glanced at Lu Chen. She lifted up her red phoenix robe and waved her sleeves. The next moment, only the white underwear was left on her body. Then Empress Tianhong slowly came to the soft couch and sat down. Seeing this scene, Lu Chen seemed to remember what Yun Xianxian did to him. In order to practice with him, Yun Xianxian also used tough means. He didn't know how many years it had been since he had been forcibly pushed down by a woman. What happened to Empress Tianhong? He hadn't looked for her yet, but she came to look for him instead. Lu Chen tried to unlock the power of confinement, but he only had a thought, and the confinement on his body was instantly unlocked. Empress Tianhong's current body is made of branches of the dragon and phoenix tree, and her power will be restricted by Lu Chen, which is the same as the woman who drank the dragon and phoenix tea cannot hurt Lu Chen. But just when Lu Chen wanted to do something, something suddenly occurred to his mind. Why should he break free? Isn't this the best opportunity to get Empress Tianhong? In order not to arouse Empress Tianhong's disgust, he had never made a move on Empress Tianhong. Empress Tianhong was a great emperor in her previous life. After she recovered her strength, the dragon and phoenix tree would have no effect on her. After the effect of the dragon and phoenix tree expired, what if Empress Tianhong hated him and made a move on him? But if it was Empress Tianhong who took the initiative to find her to do that kind of thing, and when Empress Tianhong really broke through the realm of the great emperor, she couldn't blame herself. Thinking of this, Lu Chen didn't get up, just lying there. He wanted to see what tricks Empress Tianhong could play. At this time, Empress Tianhong also noticed that Lu Chen had broken free from the restraints. In order to prevent Lu Chen from escaping, Empress Tianhong used her power to restrain Lu Chen again. Lu Chen did not break the restraints again this time, just lying on the soft couch, staring at Empress Tianhong. The white underwear wrapped Empress Tianhong's scorching figure, the golden hair accessories on her head showed her nobility, the cold and beautiful face made people more eager to conquer, and the Taoist charm emanating from her body made her more noble. For a while, Lu Chen's heart became restless. After noticing Lu Chen's abnormality, Empress Tianhong glanced at Lu Chen's body again. Even though she knew that Lu Chen had already had thoughts about her at this time, Empress Tianhong still had no reaction on her face. It was as if she was doing something very ordinary now. Lu Chen laughed in his heart. He didn't believe that the Rainbow Queen would still look so cold later. Just as Lu Chen thought so, the Rainbow Queen's slender jade hand passed across Lu Chen's broad and strong chest, and then continued to move down. Lu Chen originally thought that the Rainbow Queen would take it step by step, but he didn't expect that the Rainbow Queen's body sank just at the beginning. Lu Chen hurriedly said, "Wait." Before Lu Chen finished speaking, the Rainbow Queen entered an intimate state with Lu Chen. The moment the two touched, an electric current instantly connected their bodies. Lu Chen and the Rainbow Queen were stunned. They did not expect such a thing to happen. The next moment, Lu Chen found that the spiritual power in his body actually rushed to the body of the Rainbow Queen. Lu Chen was dumbfounded. What happened? He thought that the Rainbow Queen had used some secret method, but when his eyes fell on the face of the Rainbow Queen, he found that the Rainbow Queen had a flushed face and clenched her teeth, as if she was enduring something. The Rainbow Queen asked at this time, What did you do?" Lu Chen was a little confused. He did nothing. He thought that the Rainbow Queen had used some means. When Lu Chen usually practiced with his wives and concubines, it took a process to experience the joy of men and women. But it was different with the Rainbow Queen. As soon as the two entered the intimate state, they experienced the joy of men and women, and it was continuous. Why did this happen? Just when Lu Chen was confused, the body of the Tianhong Empress could no longer support herself, and she fell directly down and lay on Lu Chen's chest. After the close contact between their bodies, Lu Chen became more agitated, and the spiritual power in his body was lost faster. After a while, the spiritual power of the Tianhong Empress suddenly burst out, and in an instant, the entire palace was shaken. Lu Chen suddenly realized that the Tianhong Empress was about to break through. Soon, the sky above the Tianchen world was covered with dark clouds, and thick black clouds appeared. At this time, everyone outside the Tianchen world could see that the entire Tianchen world was wrapped in a layer of black clouds and mist. Purple lightning was galloping in the clouds and mist, forming thunder dragons, which looked very terrifying. After seeing this terrifying scene, the immortal boats and starships outside the Tianchen world hurried away from the Tianchen world. End of this chapter. Chapter 1010, The Red Flower Sedan reappears. At this time, Lu Chen also sensed the abnormality of the Tianchen world, and was extremely shocked. Is this the Great Emperor's tribulation? A heavenly tribulation actually enveloped the entire Tianchen world, which was too terrible. If this heavenly tribulation fell, I'm afraid the entire Tianchen world would be destroyed, right? The Great Emperor was not going through the tribulation of the world of life, but the heavenly tribulation of the law of the origin of the universe. The destructiveness of this heavenly tribulation can be imagined. The Tianhong Empress also realized that she couldn't survive the tribulation in this state, so she tried to get up, and her white jade-like palms supported both sides of Lu Chen's chest, trying to get up and leave. But she soon discovered that her and Lu Chen's bodies seemed to be locked up, and they couldn't get up at all. Lu Chen also felt this at this moment, and Lu Chen was dumbfounded. This is the great emperor's heavenly tribulation. Let him, a saint, survive the tribulation with the Tianhong Empress? Isn't this going to kill him? Lu Chen no longer hesitated and directly lifted the restraints set by Empress Tianhong for himself. Then he hugged Empress Tianhong's waist, turned Empress Tianhong under him, and then took the initiative to try to withdraw. The result was the same as before. No matter what method he used, he couldn't leave. The power in their bodies seemed to be fused together. Feeling that the power of chaos outside the Tianchen world was increasing, Lu Chen's face was a little pale, and he couldn't help thinking that it was over. To die under the peony flower, to be a ghost is also romantic. It is romantic, but this time I will really become a ghost. At the same time, in a house in Black Dragon City. After seeing the black clouds in the sky, Pei Tianlu felt a little confused. Someone had tried to break through the emperor before and failed. How could someone bring about the emperor's heavenly tribulation so quickly? Are there so many quasi-emperors in the Tianchen world? Could it be Shuhua? Thinking of this, Pei Tianlu became nervous for a while. As a person who has been through it, he knows the horror of the emperor's heavenly tribulation. If the Dao heart is unstable, the consequences of failing to pass the tribulation will be very serious. At the least, the cultivation will be lost, and at the worst, the body will die. However, Pei Tianlu soon found something wrong. The thunder dragon in the sky was very violent, and the Dao that appeared was not the Dao that Pei Shuhua usually comprehended. Pei Tianlu's expression suddenly became very serious, and he said to himself, "This is the Dao of killing. If this person breaks through, I'm afraid the entire universe will fall into endless war again." The emperors who master the Dao of killing are very rare. At present, there is no second person in this universe except the Shenwu Emperor. Usually, the emperors who master the Dao of killing will go to the outside world, but some emperors will attack the various forces in this universe in order to stabilize their cultivation. In order to stabilize his cultivation and consolidate his Dao heart, the Shenwu Emperor personally led his troops to fight in all directions. If it weren't for the fact that the Shenwu Emperor was injured for some unknown reason, I'm afraid that most of the dynasties in this universe would be destroyed by the Shenwu Emperor. At this time, a wide road appeared in the sky. On the road, there were countless bones and scattered spiritual weapons. A woman holding a blood-red sword slowly walked towards the thunder dragon in the sky. Seeing that the thunder dragon in the black cloud was about to rush towards the woman on the road, suddenly, ripples appeared in the space, and a red sedan appeared out of thin air. The thunder dragons in the sky seemed to be stimulated by something, and all of them chopped towards the red sedan, but when the thunder dragons containing destructive power touched the red sedan, all of them were absorbed. Seeing this scene, Pei Tianlu was stunned. What kind of magic weapon is this that can even intercept the Emperor's heavenly tribulation? After living for so many years, this is the first time he has seen such a treasure. He has never even heard of it before. At this time, the Tianhong Empress in the palace also felt that her heavenly tribulation was absorbed by the red sedan. This. The Tianhong Empress and Lu Chen looked at each other. The Rainbow Queen knew that this red sedan chair might be related to Lu Chen. She followed Lu Chen and heard Lu Chen's wives and concubines talk about the red sedan chair many times, and she had also seen the red sedan chair. Just when the Rainbow Queen was distracted, the red sedan chair in the sky disappeared, but soon it appeared in the bedroom of the Rainbow Queen. Lu Chen and the Rainbow Queen turned their heads to look at the red sedan chair at the same time. The red sedan chair emitted a red halo. When the halo touched Lu Chen's body, the spiritual power on Lu Chen's body stopped flowing to the Rainbow Queen, and Lu Chen's happiness also ended at this moment. The Rainbow Queen realized that their bodies had been unlocked, so she raised her hand and pushed Lu Chen's chest, trying to push Lu Chen away. Since she had already broken through to become the Great Emperor, there was no need for her to continue doing this kind of thing with Lu Chen. Lu Chen also saw what Empress Tianhong was thinking. He felt a little sorry. Now that Empress Tianhong's cultivation had recovered and she was free from the limitations of her physical body, the dragon and phoenix tree had no effect on her. It would be difficult for her to experience the kind of continuous happiness she brought in the future. However, when Lu Chen was about to withdraw, the red sedan suddenly emitted a red halo. For a moment, the entire bedroom of Empress Tianhong was illuminated in red. Lu Chen's desire also completely erupted at this moment. Empress Tianhong also noticed something was wrong and wanted to push Lu Chen away quickly. However, the next moment, her arms were grabbed by Lu Chen's hands and pressed directly on both sides of her shoulders. "What are you going to do?" Empress Tianhong said coldly. Lu Chen seemed to have lost consciousness, and completely ignored Empress Tianhong, and leaned down directly. Empress Tianhong was trying to avoid it, but found that her body was out of control. Empress Tianhong was not unable to accept having sex with Lu Chen, after all, they were still intimate now, but she was just trying to break through, and she was the active party. Now Lu Chen turned over and took the initiative, and even wanted to kiss her, which made Empress Tianhong somewhat unacceptable. Seeing his lips getting closer and closer, Empress Tianhong immediately mobilized the power in her body and tried to break free from the imprisonment. The next moment, Empress Tianhong's face changed slightly. She had now broken through to become a great emperor, but she couldn't break free from the control of the red sedan chair. What level of spiritual weapon is this? Why can it release such a terrifying power that even the great emperor can be imprisoned? Empress Tianhong suddenly thought of something. He is now a great emperor, and he can completely let his soul leave his body, and then he can create a new body. Thinking of this, Empress Tianhong immediately performed the soul-leaving body technique, but the next moment, Lu Chen's mouth blocked her red lips, while her soul was still in this flesh. Empress Tianhong's brain was slightly startled, and when she came to her senses, Lu Chen had already begun to move. Empress Tianhong did not give up. She continued to try to get rid of the control of the red flower sedan, but soon the restless spiritual power in her body made her have no mind to exert her power. Empress Tianhong was immediately enraged. Bastard! This beast! Empress Tianhong continued to struggle, but no matter what power she used, she could not control her body, and could only watch herself being manipulated by Lu Chen. Empress Tianhong was very angry when she thought that she, a great emperor who controlled the way of killing, was actually toyed with by a saint. However, no matter how angry she was, she had no way to deal with the red flower sedan. Time passed by, and gradually the sound of Empress Tianhong's humming could be heard in the room. Although Empress Tianhong never gave up on getting rid of his control, the feeling Lu Chen brought to her penetrated deep into her soul, and she could not suppress it at all. End of this chapter. Chapter 1011 Lu Chen and number 039, S Enlightenment. Lu Chen did not lose consciousness for too long. He actually woke up quickly and regained control of his body. But he did not withdraw. He thought of the scene when he and Lu Qingyun were doing things in the red sedan chair. Taiwan Novel Network. Although he and Empress Tianhong were not in the red sedan chair at this time, he felt that the red sedan chair meant for him and Empress Tianhong to continue. Once he had the idea of withdrawing, the red sedan chair would probably control him again. When Lu Chen thought of an empress being oppressed by himself like this, he was extremely restless. He thought to himself that he would use the red sedan chair as an excuse afterwards, so he didn't need to worry about anything now. Then Lu Chen used all the methods he had explored on his wives and concubines on Empress Tianhong. Although Empress Tianhong never gave up struggling, under these methods of Lu Chen, her inner desires were still mobilized. What Lu Chen didn't expect was that the physique of the Rainbow Queen was very special, like a big melting pot. If it weren't for his body being transformed long ago, he probably wouldn't be able to hold on for too long. In this way, the Rainbow Queen, who mastered the way of killing, was oppressed by Lu Chen for a whole year. Lu Chen had no choice. Every time he thought it was almost done, he would think about doing it one last time, and then there would be countless last times. For Lu Chen now, doing this kind of thing is just like those immortal cultivators meditating and practicing. Immortal cultivators sit cross-legged for several years, or even hundreds of years, and they can't feel the passage of time at all. Lu Chen is the same. Once he is immersed in happiness, he can't feel the passage of time either. It happened that there was nothing major this year, and no one disturbed Lu Chen, so Lu Chen has been immersed in practicing with the Rainbow Queen. Now the self-esteem of the Rainbow Queen has been completely shattered by Lu Chen. She has used various methods, but she can't get rid of Lu Chen's play. She knew that all this was because of the red flower sedan that was suppressing her, but she really couldn't understand how such a heaven-defying magic weapon as the red flower sedan could appear in this universe. A magic weapon that is too powerful will be rejected by the universe. A magic weapon like the red flower sedan that can completely suppress the emperor should not exist in this universe. At most, it can only exist in the outer domain. Unless the red flower sedan is so terrifying that it can suppress this original universe, then it is even more heaven-defying. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audio Wave. It is hard to imagine that Lu Chen, a beast who only knows how to lie on women every day, would be related to such a heaven-defying magic weapon. In the warm palace, Lu Chen propped himself up, interlocked his hands with those of the Rainbow Empress, pressed her hands on both sides of his body, and looked down at her, but his body was still moving. The Rainbow Empress's face was flushed, her eyebrows were full of affection. Even though she was the Empress who mastered killing, she could not resist Lu Chen's various methods after all. Fortunately, the Rainbow Empress still retained her self-consciousness. After all, she was the Emperor. At this time, the Rainbow Queen said coldly, "Enough." Lu Chen could not feel the passage of time, but the Rainbow Queen, who mastered the power of the law, knew very well that a year had passed. The Rainbow Queen could clearly feel that Lu Chen was not affected by the red flower sedan at all. Lu Chen's original idea of blaming the red flower sedan would not work with the Rainbow Queen. As an emperor, she was very sensitive to various powers. She did sense that Lu Chen was controlled by the special power in the red flower sedan at the beginning, but this power soon disappeared, and Lu Chen was in control of the body afterwards. She originally thought that this guy would let her go in a month or two at most, but a year had passed, and this beast had no intention of letting her go. After hearing the words of the Rainbow Queen, Lu Chen was slightly stunned, but he still had no intention of stopping. Lu Chen didn't know what was going on with him. He was no longer controlled by the red flower sedan, but his heart was filled with desire and he couldn't control himself at all. At this moment, a powerful spiritual power rushed out of Lu Chen's body. For a moment, everything in the bedroom disappeared, and the whole room turned into a sea of flowers. This is... Seeing this sea of flowers again, Empress Tianhong was stunned. When Lu Chen was practicing in Fiheng Xianzhou before, such a vision appeared. And she also saw a pair of dogs and men doing something in the vision. Even as an emperor, Empress Tianhong still didn't understand whether this vision was an illusion or a real scene. Soon Empress Tianhong reacted. The scene she saw at the time was a man and a woman doing something in the sea of flowers. At that time, wasn't it just like this moment? Could it be? Empress Tianhong suspected that what she saw in the Xianzhou before was a scene in the future, that is, what is happening now. Just when Empress Tianhong was distracted, Lu Chen suddenly roared, and Empress Tianhong's thoughts were instantly disrupted. Empress Tianhong was a little helpless. This damn dog thing, no wonder Lu Chen's woman loves and hates him. The Rainbow Queen calmed down her emotions and continued to observe the sea of flowers. At this moment, she suddenly found that the Tao flowed through Lu Chen's body. He seemed to have entered the state of enlightenment. Although his body movements had not stopped, he had lost consciousness. What he was doing now was done unconsciously. The Rainbow Queen frowned slightly, wanting to take this opportunity to turn over, but she found that she was suppressed by an invisible force in the sea of flowers and could only be forced to continue to go with the flow with Lu Chen. Lu Chen did not completely lose consciousness, but his consciousness was no longer in his body. At this time, he seemed to be in a void. He could not see anything and could not hear anything. But not long after, a strong light appeared in front of him, and the chaos was split by something, and then he saw a barren world. In those barren worlds, there were volcanoes everywhere, and magma emitting various gases was everywhere. As time passed day by day, the magma gradually cooled down, lakes and oceans appeared on the earth, and some microorganisms appeared in the ocean. Lu Chen felt that those pictures were like slides. Although they were shown very quickly, he felt that he was experiencing the process in person. Lu Chen thought to himself, is this the process of the birth of life on earth? Why do I see these things? While Lu Chen was puzzled, the scene of the birth of life was constantly changing in front of him. Gradually, microorganisms began to aggregate and became single-celled organisms, then multi-celled organisms, and finally evolved into animals and plants. However, just when animals were born in those barren worlds, a huge meteorite fell from the sky, followed by a mass extinction of species. However, after the mass extinction of species, not all organisms died. Soon new organisms appeared and there was another biological explosion. But after the biological explosion, there will be another biological extinction, and the cycle will repeat. Chapter 1012 Hong Hong, I want you to help me become an emperor. Although he saw the birth process of life on earth, Lu Chen was still in a state of confusion. He felt his brain was in chaos and his consciousness was also fuzzy. After a while, a strong voice sounded in his mind. Tao gave birth to 1, 1 gave birth to 2, 2 gave birth to 3, and 3 gave birth to all things. If Tao does not stop, then Yin and Yang will not stop, and if Yin and Yang do not stop, then life will not stop. The moment the voice sounded, Lu Chen's brain became clear in an instant, and his consciousness returned to his body. Then the Tao rhyme on his body became stronger, his sea of consciousness expanded wildly, and the small world in his body also expanded rapidly. In a moment, his small world expanded to the size of the solar system. Lu Chen suddenly felt extremely surprised. Did he break through? Seeing Lu Chen's current state, Tianhong Empress was also a little surprised. Could this beast really break through to the realm of the Emperor in this way? Although she broke through because she had done something with Lu Chen, it was because she had not yet repaid the cause and effect, and had to do things with Lu Chen, but in fact her cultivation still relied on herself. Lu Chen was different. He hardly practiced on his own. He spent most of his time in the beds of his wives and concubines. If he could still break through to the great emperor realm, then the origin of the universe was too partial. After Lu Chen broke through, he thought it was over, but he soon found that there seemed to be a strange feeling in his heart that blocked him, making him very uncomfortable. The next moment, Lu Chen's eyes appeared again. He saw a solemn and simple stone door with many pictures of men and women practicing together carved on it. Then, a strange thought flooded into Lu Chen's mind. He suddenly had a feeling that as long as he gave birth to another offspring, he could directly break through to the great emperor realm. And the one who gave birth to his offspring must be a great emperor. Seeing the green Tao rhyme on Lu Chen, the Tianhong Empress frowned. What was going on? Lu Chen had already broken through to the quasi-emperor realm, so why was he still in the state of enlightenment? Could it be that he was going to break through to the great emperor realm directly? Just as Empress Tianhong was thinking this, she suddenly found that Lu Chen's movements became fierce. Empress Tianhong originally thought that Lu Chen would let her go after breaking through to the quasi-emperor realm, but she didn't expect Lu Chen to continue. At this moment, Empress Tianhong found that her body seemed to be able to move, the red sedan chair in the bedroom had disappeared, and the original force that suppressed her had also dissipated. In other words, she could now push Lu Chen away and get rid of him. However, after seeing Lu Chen in the state of enlightenment, Empress Tianhong fell into hesitation. After all, Lu Chen was the one who resurrected her. Now Lu Chen was in the state of enlightenment. If she pushed Lu Chen away at this time, it would probably interrupt Lu Chen. She originally needed to repay the cause and effect. If her interruption caused Lu Chen to fail to prove the truth and failed to break through to the Great Emperor realm, then she would have to bear more cause and effect. After pondering for a long time, Empress Tianhong finally continued to lie down reluctantly and let Lu Chen do whatever he wanted. After experiencing that mysterious state, Lu Chen gradually came back to his senses, and he seemed to understand what was going on. If he wanted to become an emperor, he had to make an emperor pregnant. The process of an emperor giving birth to a child was different from that of an ordinary person. The process of an emperor giving birth to a child was full of the rhyme of various life paths, and in this process there was a complete life path for Lu Chen to comprehend. Lu Chen thought to himself that the Rainbow Empress had just broken through to the realm of the emperor, and he had found the opportunity to prove his way. Sure enough, everything about him was arranged. But no matter what, he had to keep going now. Only by proving his way to the emperor could he know more of the truth and figure out what was going on with the system and the red sedan chair. But there was a more troublesome thing next. As we all know, the higher the realm, the smaller the probability of getting pregnant, especially when it comes to the realm of the emperor. A great emperor may not be able to give birth to a child in tens of thousands of years. And the one under him was the Rainbow Empress. The Tianhong Empress was obviously somewhat disgusted with him, and she was no longer affected by the dragon and phoenix tree after she became an emperor. Moreover, the red sedan chair had already left, and there was nothing to suppress her anymore. It was a foolish dream to ask her to help him bear children. Could it be that he had to wait for Pei Shihua to break through to the great emperor and let Pei Shihua give birth to a child for him? Let alone when Pei Shihua could achieve enlightenment and become an emperor, even if Pei Shihua became an emperor, she might not be willing to give birth to a child for him. At this time, the Tianhong Empress noticed that Lu Chen's eyes had gradually become bright, and he had obviously come to his senses, so he said coldly, "Since you helped me achieve enlightenment, I won't bother with you. You can get up." The Tianhong Empress only moved her mouth to speak, but her body did not move. With her current strength, she could completely push Lu Chen away, but when she thought that she was able to revive because of Lu Chen's help, she tried to suppress the murderous aura in her body and let herself be polite to Lu Chen. Hearing what Empress Tianhong said, Lu Chen did not stand up. He stared at Empress Tianhong's beautiful eyes. Empress Tianhong was a little puzzled. She didn't know why Lu Chen was staring at her so straight. Even though she was a great emperor, she felt a chill in her back when she was looked at by Lu Chen's lustful eyes. Lu Chen said, "Hong Hong, I want you to help me become an emperor." The Rainbow Queen was stunned. What does it have to do with her if he wants to become an emperor? Just now, Lu Chen had withdrawn from the state of enlightenment. If Lu Chen wanted to become an emperor, she could let him indulge himself, but Lu Chen has now withdrawn from the state of enlightenment. The Rainbow Queen then said coldly, "I know that you have an extraordinary origin, but you should understand that the emperor cannot be insulted. Even if you were an emperor, your current strength is only at the level of a saint. You want to make me your forbidden fruit and play with me at will. Aren't you afraid that I will kill you in anger?" Lu Chen glanced at the personal information of the Rainbow Queen. Name, Rainbow Queen. Identity, Reborn Emperor. As an emperor who proved his way by killing, she is naturally lacking in emotions. Now she has developed feelings for the host. In order to repay the cause and effect, she is willing to do anything for the host. Rating, 100. Favorability, 90. Seeing the personal information of Empress Tianhong, Lu Chen was slightly relieved. Although Empress Tianhong looked cold, the issue of bearing offspring was not unnegotiable. Among Lu Chen's women, a favorability of 90 was not high. After all, most of his wives and concubines could basically reach a favorability of 100 as long as they followed him for about a year. Empress Tianhong had been with him for so many years, but her favorability was only 90. However, after seeing the system information, Lu Chen knew that Empress Tianhong proved her way by killing and fighting, and her feelings were lacking, which made Lu Chen not care so much about this favorability. Lu Chen then looked at Empress Tianhong and said seriously, "Hong Hong, there is something I want to discuss with you." End of this chapter. Chapter 1013. Do you think I am number 039, am a fool? Seeing that Lu Chen completely ignored her threat, Empress Tianhong frowned slightly. She was an emperor who had proven her way through killing, but now she didn't even have such a deterrent effect. When she was still in the outland, the great emperor would not hide away from her when he saw her. This was the first time she met someone who dared to talk to her like this, and who dared to ignore her threats. But then again, this guy has been using her as his plaything for a year, and there seems to be nothing he doesn't dare to do. Empress Tianhong exuded strong murderous intent, but after seeing Lu Chen's expectant eyes, she calmed down her inner emotions again and tried to calm down. "What's the matter?" Empress Tianhong asked. She planned to listen to what Lu Chen said first, and then make a decision. Lu Chen said directly, "I want to understand the way of life." "Oh, no, it should be called the way of creation. But to walk this avenue, there must be an emperor as a guide." Empress Tianhong was stunned. The avenue of creation? She had been with Lu Chen for so many years and often heard him mention the so-called way of life, but those were just love words that Lu Chen said in bed when he was fooling around with his wives and concubines. This had always been just a joke to her, and Lu Chen's wives and concubines hardly took Lu Chen's idea of the road to life to heart. And now, Lu Chen actually wants to use the so-called way of life to prove the truth and become an emperor? Among the 3,000 avenues, there is a way to create life. But when this avenue is spoken from Lu Chen's mouth, it makes people think about it, and it always makes people feel that Lu Chen's so-called way of creation is not a serious avenue. And this was the first time he heard that in order to achieve enlightenment and become an emperor, a great emperor was needed as a guide. Empress Tianhong then asked coldly, "Do you think I am a fool? Proving the great emperor is a matter for the cultivator himself. How could he need the great emperor to guide him?" Lu Chen was deceiving her at first sight. After all, she is also a great emperor, but she actually deceived this great emperor. This is how much he looks down on her. Seeing that Empress Tianhong didn't seem to believe it, Lu Chen continued to explain, "The great emperor contains the power of many laws, and has a small world with relatively complete rules in his body. If I can have children with a great emperor, I can understand from the birth of life the way of creation." Hearing this, Empress Tianhong was stunned for a moment, and then her heart was filled with anger. Was she trying to trick her into giving birth to a child by asking herself to help him prove the truth? Who do you think she is? Lu Chen clearly noticed that Empress Tianhong was angry, so he quickly said again, "I am serious. Although this may sound ridiculous, you have followed me for a long time. You should also be able to tell from what I have done over the years. Yes, my cultivation method is indeed different from that of ordinary people." Empress Tianhong calmed down the anger in her heart and pondered for a moment. Lu Chen's words were not a lie. Lu Chen rarely practiced deliberately in these years, but his cultivation level kept rising. "But," Empress Tianhong then said coldly, "even if what you said is true, why would I sacrifice myself to help you achieve enlightenment?" This. Lu Chen thought for a moment, and originally wanted to say that this could repay the cause and effect, but Lu Chen felt that he shouldn't say this kind of thing. Things like cause and effect are mysterious and mysterious. If you talk about it, it will become a transaction, and it may have nothing to do with repaying cause and effect. Moreover, there are many ways for Empress Tianhong to repay karma, and she does not necessarily have to repay karma by giving birth to a child. But if there is no need to repay the cause and effect as an excuse, then what excuse should we make? He had just read the information about Empress Tianhong and knew that Empress Tianhong was willing to do anything to repay her karma. The most important thing now is to give Empress Tianhong a step down. After all, Empress Tianhong is the great emperor and has the dignity of being the great emperor. At this moment, Lu Chen suddenly thought of something. With a thought in his mind, his consciousness entered the sea of consciousness and found that there was a red long sword in his sea of consciousness, and that red long sword was left behind when he contracted with Fiheng immortal boat. At that time, Empress Tianhong was still the weapon spirit of Fiheng immortal boat. Although Empress Tianhong has been resurrected now, the mark has not disappeared, so Empress Tianhong is still the weapon spirit of Fiheng immortal boat. This mark is different from the influence of the dragon and phoenix tree. This contract mark acts on the soul. Even if Empress Tianhong is no longer controlled by her body, she will still be affected by this mark. With this mark, Lu Chen is the master of Fiheng immortal boat and the master of Empress Tianhong. Thinking of this, Lu Chen took the initiative to move the red sword, and the next moment, the red sword made a buzzing sound. At this time, Empress Tianhong's brain was startled, and a lot of information suddenly filled her mind. Her eyes widened, her expression looked a little confused, and she looked at Lu Chen in disbelief. Soon she came back to her senses, her murderous aura became stronger, her eyes showed a fierce look, as if she wanted to kill Lu Chen. She didn't realize it at first, but deep in her soul, there was a master-servant contract left behind, and this contract was left behind when she was a tool spirit. If Lu Chen hadn't prompted the contract just now, she might never have noticed its existence. When Lu Chen activated the contract, her mind was instantly filled with love for Lu Chen, and her favorability level rose to 100. But when Lu Chen stopped activating the contract, she quickly calmed down. Lu Chen's favorability level also dropped to 90. As an emperor, he is naturally not willing to be controlled by others. Lu Chen then continued, "This contract was signed by us when you were still a weapon spirit. Although I don't know your origin, I can guess that you are not an ordinary person. I believe you don't want such a contract to restrict your freedom. Let's do this. If you help me prove the truth, I will find a way to terminate this contract." Empress Tianhong looked at Lu Chen coldly and said nothing. Although Lu Chen was pressing down on Empress Tianhong at this time, the aura exuded by Empress Tianhong made him feel a little shuddering. Lu Chen had no choice. In this situation, he could only use the contract. He also didn't expect that the blood-dropping recognition method he used on the Fiheng immortal boat was still useful after the Rainbow Empress broke through to the Great Emperor. After an unknown amount of time, Empress Tianhong said, "If you don't terminate the contract for me after the matter is completed, I will kill you with my own hands." Seeing that Empress Tianhong agreed, Lu Chen was very excited. Now it depends on his ability. Lu Chen then said, "In that case, let's get started." As soon as Lu Chen finished speaking, he found that his body was imprisoned by Empress Tianhong. The next moment, Empress Tianhong turned over, pressed him down, and then sat on him. Lu Chen was slightly startled, and quickly realized that Empress Tianhong wanted to take the initiative. Empress Tianhong was condescending, looking down at Lu Chen indifferently, looking at Lu Chen with a look that looked at garbage, and said, "I am not your plaything." End of this chapter. Chapter 1014. Don't you want to fulfill our agreement quickly? Although she agreed to help Lu Chen achieve enlightenment, Empress Tianhong had no intention of letting Lu Chen continue to act recklessly. Since Lu Chen just wanted her to be pregnant with his child, then she could completely take the initiative and squeeze Lu Chen. Anyway, as long as she was pregnant with the child, the process was not important. Lu Chen didn't pay much attention to this. With the master-servant contract, Lu Chen could actually control Empress Tianhong and overwhelm Empress Tianhong again. But Lu Chen didn't intend to do this. It was already good that Empress Tianhong agreed to be pregnant with her child. There was no need for him to push the envelope too much, and he still wanted to save some face for Empress Tianhong. In the next few months, Empress Tianhong has been taking the initiative. During these months, Lu Chen tried his best to convert his spiritual power into life force, and then transferred this life power into Empress Tianhong body. However, several months passed in the blink of an eye, and there was still no movement in Empress Tianhong's belly. Lu Chen has also been studying this process in the past few months, and found that the emperor's difficulty in conceiving children was mainly because there was a powerful force preventing them from having children. This force was very special, just like the power of the rules of the universe. Lu Chen thought in his mind that perhaps there was such a rule because the consciousness of the universe was afraid that the offspring conceived by the emperor would be too powerful. At this moment, there were many people outside the palace of Empress Tianhong. Mu Zixuan and the others had not seen Lu Chen for more than a year, and they were all curious about what Lu Chen had done, so they all came to Black Dragon City. Normally, they wouldn't be worried even if Lu Chen went into seclusion for a year or two, but this time Lu Chen seemed to have suddenly disappeared without telling them what he was doing in advance. They thought something had happened to Lu Chen. However, after arriving in Black Dragon City, they realized that Lu Chen had acquired a new woman, and that he had been focusing all his energy on that woman for more than a year. Feeling the movement in the palace, Yongxian Xianlia frowned slightly. She had been in Black Dragon City all the time, so she knew very well that Lu Chen had never stopped since he slept with that Hong Hong. She also understood Lu Chen. Logically speaking, no matter how greedy Lu Chen was, he would take a break and practice meditation for a few months. But this time it took more than a year, which is a bit strange. At this time, Chu Yukan in the courtyard looked at Empress Tianhong's chamber and asked, "Sister Yun, has Chener been in Hong Hong's room for more than a year?" Regarding Lu Chen's matter, Chu Yukan had heard about it a few months ago, but she still couldn't believe that Lu Chen would stay in a room alone for so long. She was wondering if Lu Chen had occasionally left Empress Tianhong's room, but this year Lu Chen was more obsessed with Empress Tianhong and often came to Empress Tianhong's place to pamper her. That's why it gave people the illusion that Lu Chen had been in Empress Tianhong's room for more than a year. Yun Xianxian said at this time, he has indeed been in her room for more than a year. Hearing Yun Xiangxian's affirmative answer, Chu Yukan frowned slightly. Lu Chen has always been very particular about getting evenly distributed. Even if he really likes a woman, he is unlikely to be obsessed with her body forever. He will change his taste in at most 3 months. Why did he stay so long this time? Could it be that Hong Hong used some means? Chu Yukan had always felt that Hong Hong didn't look like a weapon spirit. The strength of a weapon spirit increased faster than that of all cultivators. She became a quasi-emperor even in 50 years, and it was said that one day she had already broken through to the realm of the great emperor years ago. But she never came out of the room, and people couldn't be sure whether she was a real emperor now. At this time, Chu Yukan was very worried about Lu Chen's condition. At the same time, Empress Tianhong was still sitting on Lu Chen's body in the room. Her face looked as usual at this time. Although there was some blush, she did not feel intoxicated. She said expressionlessly, "It seems that your women are very dissatisfied with me." Lu Chen checked the outside and knew that they were worried about him, so he took the initiative to send a message to them and said, "Ladies, I am in retreat to strive for the realm of the great emperor. I may stay here in Hong Kong for the next few years." Upon hearing Lu Chen's message, the girls were shocked. Great Emperor Realm? Real or fake? Is their husband going to become emperor so soon? Could it be that what he often said before, that he would use the way of life to prove the truth and become an emperor, was not a joke, but serious? After realizing that Lu Chen was fine, Mu Zixuan said, "Since my husband is fine, my sister will go back to Yanqing first." After hearing Mu Zixuan's words, Wang Qingkai said, "I'm going back to practice too." Soon, Lu Chen's wives and concubines dispersed. After they left, Empress Tianhong looked down at Lu Chen's eyes and said, "That's it for this time. The emperor wants to have children, and it doesn't happen overnight." After being intimate with Lu Chen for more than a year, Empress Tianhong no longer had any interest in it. As an emperor who proved her way through killing, what she was most interested in was war. Although this kind of thing did make her happy, as time went by, she found it uninteresting. Moreover, it is not easy to get a great emperor pregnant, so there is no need to be so anxious. Lu Chen said with a smile, "If you feel tired, you can lie down and practice. I will do it myself." Hearing Lu Chen's words, Empress Tianhong stared at Lu Chen coldly. "What, you still want to turn me into your plaything?" Lu Chen asked, "Don't you want to complete our agreement quickly and regain your freedom?" The Rainbow Empress frowned slightly. Of course she wanted to get rid of the master-servant contract, but it was not that easy to get the emperor pregnant. If she never got pregnant, would she and Lu Chen have to stay in this state? Lu Chen continued, "You practice yours, and I will handle mine. Now that you are no longer affected by the dragon and phoenix tree, I believe that whatever I do will not disturb your practice." Empress Tianhong felt that what Lu Chen said made sense. She had become an emperor and could cut off the sensations caused by her body. In this way, her seclusion would not be affected. Maybe by the time her retreat ends, she will already be pregnant. Thinking of this, Empress Tianhong said, "Okay." Seeing that Empress Tianhong agreed, Lu Chen raised his hand and directly took Empress Tianhong's jade hand, then pulled her body into his arms, then turned over and pressed her under him. After 5 months, Lu Chen finally took the initiative again. Empress Tianhong lay quietly on the soft couch, glanced at Lu Chen, who was slightly excited, and closed her eyes without saying anything, preparing to practice in seclusion under such circumstances. When the emperor cultivates, he cultivates his soul. Even if he blocks his body's feelings, it will not have any effect. However, Empress Tianhong soon realized something was wrong. She just closed her eyes and tried to block out all the sensations in her body, but she found that it was useless. She could still feel the happiness that Lu Chen brought to her deep in her soul. End of chapter. Chapter 1015 Lu Chen and number 039, S first long-term retreat. The Rainbow Queen quickly understood what was going on. She had signed a contract with Lu Chen when she was still a weapon spirit. She was still Lu Chen's weapon spirit. As a weapon spirit, she could feel Lu Chen's feelings. The higher the wisdom and the stronger the weapon spirit, the more clearly it could feel the emotions of its master. After she became the emperor, her strength soared, so she became more sensitive to the emotions of her master, Lu Chen. So this had nothing to do with her body. Even if she blocked her body's senses, as long as Lu Chen felt happy, that happiness would be passed on to her through the master-servant mark deep in her soul. After figuring out what was going on, the Rainbow Queen suddenly opened her eyes and stared at Lu Chen coldly. Being stared at by the Rainbow Queen, Lu Chen immediately stopped his actions. "What's wrong?" The Rainbow Queen said coldly, "Your emotions will be transmitted to me through the master-servant mark." This. After hearing what the Rainbow Queen said, Lu Chen instantly understood what was going on. He had also clearly felt that when the Rainbow Queen was excited, he could also perceive her feelings. So, as long as he was in an excited state, even if the Rainbow Queen blocked her body perception, she would not be able to calm down and practice. Lu Chen asked, "What should you do?" In this situation, he could not take the initiative to give up the master-servant contract, otherwise who knows whether the Rainbow Queen would run away directly. Although the Rainbow Queen's favorability has reached 90, Lu Chen can also see that the Rainbow Queen is not very interested in matters between men and women. Once the master-servant contract is cancelled, the Rainbow Queen is likely to run away directly. The Rainbow Queen fell into silence, as if thinking about something. At this time, Lu Chen suggested, why don't I teach you a few dual cultivation techniques? Dual cultivation can also be considered as cultivation. After thinking for a while, Empress Tianhong said yes lightly. Lu Chen then condensed the dual cultivation techniques he knew into his consciousness, and then transmitted all of them to Empress Tianhong's sea of consciousness. Empress Tianhong had long known that Lu Chen had many dual cultivation techniques, so she was not surprised at all about the dual cultivation techniques that Lu Chen taught her. In just a moment, Empress Tianhong learned all these dual cultivation techniques and mastered them thoroughly. After seeing Empress Tianhong close her eyes slightly, Lu Chen did not disturb her, but waited quietly. After a moment, Empress Tianhong opened her eyes again, and Lu Chen asked, "How is it?" Empress Tianhong did not speak, and directly began to practice all the dual cultivation techniques that Lu Chen taught her, and Lu Chen immediately took a breath of cold air. Lu Chen suddenly found that the Rainbow Queen could completely control every part of her body, as if there was an extra blender in the furnace. Lu Chen was very puzzled. Is this a skill? This seems to be a variant of the Suan Gong? No, the Suan Gong does not have such an exaggerated effect. The effect of this skill is too good. In the future, when they practice, he doesn't even need to make any movements. The two of them just need to stay intimate. Soon Lu Chen understood what was going on. The Rainbow Queen combined the three skills of Dragon and Phoenix Yin Yang Gong, 100 birds paying homage to the Phoenix, and Suan Gong into one skill. After the three skills are combined, they will not need to consume any physical strength as before. To be honest, although this can be lazy and you can get happiness without doing anything, Lu Chen actually still likes to open and close like before. Without any movements, it looks like a real practice. The process was originally a seasoning for Lu Chen and his wives and concubines to practice together. Now, practice only requires entering an intimate state, then running the skills, and then hugging each other waiting for happiness to come. It's too boring. However, Lu Chen thought about it and realized that the Rainbow Queen was a self-respecting queen, so it was normal that she didn't want to use all kinds of means on her. Forget it, he just wanted to have a child with the Rainbow Queen anyway. Lu Chen then lay down, and the two of them pressed tightly together. The Rainbow Queen was about to say something, but the beast Lu Chen actually lowered his head and blocked her soft red lips. A few months ago, she kissed Lu Chen because she was forced to do so under the influence of the red sedan chair. She couldn't resist Lu Chen, but now there is no red sedan chair to suppress her, and Lu Chen dared to kiss her. For the current Rainbow Queen, kissing is more unacceptable than doing things between men and women. Feeling that Lu Chen's mouth was dishonest, the Rainbow Queen immediately wanted to push Lu Chen away, but Lu Chen put his arms behind her jade back, put one hand under her jade back, and the other hand behind her hair, and then hugged her tightly. Auras immediately burst out from the Rainbow Queen, threatening Lu Chen to shut up quickly. But Lu Chen still did what he wanted. Now that his body was locked and he couldn't move, he could only satisfy his desire to talk. Seeing that Lu Chen had no intention of stopping, the killing aura on the body of the Rainbow Queen became heavier, but at this moment, the spiritual power in their bodies suddenly cheered. The Rainbow Queen couldn't help but make a sound in her throat. Lu Chen suddenly felt his mind go blank. He didn't expect that the three skills would be so terrible after being integrated by the Rainbow Queen. The life force he had just condensed was actually drained in an instant. After coming to his senses, Lu Chen once again transformed the spiritual power in his body into life force. This time he used some of the original power and mixed a trace of the original power into the life force. The original power is the supreme power of this universe, and it may help to breed life. After the storm passed, the Tianhong Queen saw that Lu Chen still did not stop talking, and she was immediately furious. This beast really felt that she dared not do anything to him, right? Although she was angry, the Tianhong Queen did not directly use her power to push Lu Chen away. The Tianhong Queen thought to herself, forget it, anyway, as long as she successfully gave birth to Lu Chen's offspring, one life for one life, she would be considered to have repaid the cause and effect, and she would never have to do anything with Lu Chen again in the future. In this way, the two embraced each other and entered the state of cultivation. Time flies, and another 5 years have passed. Lu Chen and the Tianhong Queen are still in a close state. This was the first time that Lu Chen had practiced in seclusion for a long time. In the past 5 years, Lu Chen's wives and concubines would come to the Black Dragon City Palace from time to time to see Lu Chen's condition. They knew that Lu Chen was breaking through the Great Emperor realm, so they did not feel jealous of the Tianhong Empress. For them now, it was not difficult to endure decades of emptiness, not to mention that it was only a few years. They are now in a passive state of affection. Only when they come into contact with Lu Chen will they have the idea of men and women. If Lu Chen is not around, their minds are either on cultivation or on managing power. Of course, they still miss Lu Chen in their hearts, but this is only an emotional yearning, not mixed with physical desire. Seeing that Lu Chen has not come out, gradually, some of Lu Chen's wives and concubines also began to retreat, and the Black Dragon City Palace gradually became less lively than it was a few years ago. End of this chapter. Chapter 1016 Qizong and number 039, S Analysis. King Yun Dynasty. The Palace, the Golden Throne Hall. The hall was magnificent and glittering, with a halo of light. An old man in a green robe and grey hair stood in the hall, looking at the picture projected by the projection stone in front of him, with an extremely solemn expression. At this time, a man in a yellow dragon robe entered the hall, looked at the old man and said, "Ancestor, I think Pei Tianlu will not come back." After hearing what Emperor Yun Qihongguang said, Qizong sighed and said, "It's hard to say. He is a dying man, and no one can predict what he will do." Ever since the King Yun dynasty helped Pei Wenfu keep the throne, the King Yun dynasty has been looking for the whereabouts of Pei Tianlu and Pei Shuhua, but until now, they have not found any traces of the two. The universe is too big, and if a great emperor and a quasi-emperor want to hide, it is indeed not so easy to find, which is tantamount to finding a needle in a haystack. If Pei Tianlu and Pei Shuhua really found a place to hide and never came back, then King Yun dynasty would not have to worry too much. The key is that on the day Pei Tianlu escaped from the Red Moon dynasty, Qizong and Qihongguang both felt the terrifying dark power from Pei Tianlu. As emperors, even if they didn't know what the dark power was, they could clearly feel that the dark power could erode their vitality. And they suspected that Pei Tianlu's deadline was so soon because of the erosion of the dark power. If Pei Tianlu wanted to perish with them, and ran directly to the King Yun dynasty to self-destruct and release the dark power in his body, I'm afraid King Yun dynasty would be destroyed. After knowing the horror of the dark power in Pei Tianlu, King Yun dynasty has never given up looking for Pei Tianlu in these years. In any case, Pei Tianlu cannot be allowed to get close to King Yun dynasty. At this time, Qihongguang continued, Feng Tengfei wrote that Pei Wenfu has gradually mastered the fate of the Red Moon dynasty. Perhaps it won't be long before we can transfer the fate of the Red Moon dynasty to the King Yun dynasty. Without the fate of the Red Moon dynasty, and Pei Tianlu's death is approaching, he may no longer be able to suppress the dark power in his body, and he will die suddenly in a corner of the universe. Hearing this, Qizong fell into silence. After a while, Qizong said, "Don't transfer the fate of the Red Moon dynasty for the time being. If we keep the Red Moon dynasty, Pei Tianlu will not dare to fight to the death with us. If even the Red Moon dynasty is gone, then Pei Tianlu will have no worries at all." Although Pei Tianlu wanted Pei Shuhua to take the throne, and the King Yun dynasty stopped him, the Red Moon dynasty is still in the hands of the Pei family. After all, those Pei family members are also descendants of Pei Tianlu. No matter how much Pei Tianlu hated his descendants for being dogs for other dynasties, as the ancestor of the Pei family, he could not be indifferent to the lives of his descendants. Now that the King Yun dynasty has completely controlled the Red Moon dynasty, it is only a matter of thought to kill those Pei family members. With the Pei family in hand, even if Pei Tianlu wants to run to King Yun Dynasty and die together, he must consider the consequences of his doing so. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audio Wave. As long as Pei Tianlu dares to come to King Yun Dynasty for revenge, King Yun Dynasty can also slaughter the entire Red Moon Dynasty royal family in a very short time. Now the Pei family is hostage. Qi Hongguang thought about it and felt that what his ancestor said made sense, so he said, "Well, then let's wait another 100 years. Judging from the death energy we felt from Pei Tianlu that day, he will definitely not live for more than 100 years." Speaking of this, Qi Hongguang suddenly thought of something, so he continued, "By the way, ancestor, there is one more thing. The Ye family of the Red Moon Dynasty passed us a message that there is another dynasty near the Red Moon Dynasty, called the Great Xia Dynasty. This dynasty was founded not long ago, and it has not even a history of 500 years. This dynasty has many strange things, and the starship comes from that dynasty. Under the promotion of the Ye family, many products of the Great Xia Dynasty were sold to the Great Xia Dynasty, especially the starship. When the people of the King Yun Dynasty knew about the existence of the starship a few years ago, they were very interested in the starship, and all forces wanted to obtain the manufacturing drawings of the starship. In the past, the immortal boats that crossed the Star Sea had to be made with immortal gold, and the amount of immortal gold was rare, and not all forces had immortal gold mines. Now that all forces suddenly know that there are immortal boats that can be built without immortal gold, people are of course very interested in this. It's a pity that the Ye family only sold a few starships, and the Ye family also said that they bought these starships from other star fields, and even the Ye family didn't know how to make them. Hearing Qi Hongguang's words, Qi Zong snorted and laughed. The Ye family really has a good plan. First release the news of the starship to attract the attention of all forces, and then tell us the news of the Great Xia Dynasty. They obviously want to kill with a borrowed knife. At this point, Qi Zong asked, "How many emperors are there in the Great Xia Dynasty?" Qi Hongguang replied, "According to the information of the Ye family, there are suspected to be 2 emperors. But it is rumored that the person who founded the Great Xia Dynasty was not a great emperor, but a saint, but there was a great emperor behind this saint, so they were able to create the Great Xia Dynasty. The Ye family suspects that the founder of the Great Xia Dynasty is not a saint. After all, a saint cannot create a dynasty, so they think that there are 2 emperors in the Great Xia Dynasty." Qi Zong pondered for a moment, then said, "It is a consensus that saints are not qualified to create a dynasty. If there is no dynasty, then we don't know. In your opinion, why did the Great Xia Dynasty lie like this?" Qi Hongguang thought about it, but didn't think of the reason. It was really that the lie told by the Great Xia Dynasty was too low level. It actually said that saints could create a dynasty. Even a fool knew that this so-called saint must be a great emperor. Qi Hongguang said, "Ancestor, I can't figure out why the Great Xia Dynasty lied like this. It stands to reason that if there is no dynasty, then we don't know that only great emperors can create a dynasty. Their lies are meaningless. As long as they are monks of the dynasty, they know that the Great Xia Dynasty has 2 great emperors." Qi Zong smiled, since as long as they are monks of the dynasty, they know that the founder of the Great Xia Dynasty is a great emperor, and thus infer that the Great Xia Dynasty has 2 great emperors, then the Great Xia Dynasty would have nothing to do to lie like this. I'm afraid it's true that the founder of the Great Xia Dynasty is a great emperor, but the Great Xia Emperor there is no other great emperor in the dynasty. The Great Xia Dynasty used a saint's clone to pretend to be the founder, and then let people infer that there are 2 great emperors in the Great Xia Dynasty based on the information obtained from the Great Xia Dynasty. This is the purpose of the Great Xia Dynasty's lie." Hearing Qi Zong's analysis, Qi Hongguang suddenly understood and immediately said, "Ancestor, do you mean that the Great Xia Dynasty is bluffing?" Qi Zong said, "It's not bluffing. After all, the fact that the Great Xia Dynasty has 2 great emperors was inferred by others. The Great Xia Dynasty never said that they have two great emperors from beginning to end. End of this chapter. Chapter 1017 The King Yun Dynasty and the Ye family's plot. After listening to Qi Zong's analysis, Qi Hongguang became excited instantly. If the Great Xia Dynasty really only had one great emperor, and it was still near the Qiyu Dynasty, they had no reason not to seize the luck of the Great Xia Dynasty. The Great Xia Dynasty deliberately pretended to have two great emperors sitting in charge. I am afraid that it was because the founder of the Great Xia Dynasty was not strong enough and was afraid that other dynasties would attack the Great Xia Dynasty and steal its luck, so they used this kind of falsehood and reality. Method. Qi Hongguang's lips raised slightly. This great emperor of the Great Xia Dynasty is quite clever. It's a pity that he met you, ancestor. Ancestor, what should we do next? How about I immediately send troops to attack the Great Xia Dynasty? The Ye family is already wooing other dynasties. After the news about the Great Xia Dynasty spreads, many dynasties will definitely be interested. The starship production methods possessed by the Great Xia Dynasty alone are enough for the King Yun Dynasty to attack Great Xia, not to mention that the Great Xia Dynasty is only a new dynasty that was founded not long ago. Searched Can on Google. The key is that the Great Xia Dynasty will probably only have one great emperor. With the current strength of the King Yun Dynasty, it can easily defeat the Great Xia Dynasty. Moreover, the Great Xia Dynasty had only been established not long ago, and the fortune of the dynasty had not stabilized yet. It was relatively easy to deprive the Great Xia Dynasty of its fortune, and it was not as troublesome as the Qiyu Dynasty. Qi Zong said, "Don't be too anxious. You can first send people to the Daxia Dynasty to inquire about the specific situation of the Daxia Dynasty and see if there are other forces behind the emperor who founded the Daxia Dynasty. With the catastrophe approaching, it is becoming increasingly difficult to create a dynasty. In the past, as long as an emperor wanted to create a dynasty to gather luck and practice, he could create a dynasty at will, and this dynasty could last for tens of thousands of years. For example, the Qiyu Dynasty was founded by Pei Tianlu for cultivation. Of course, all it takes to create a dynasty is one great emperor at any time, and this is also the case now. But as the competition for luck becomes more and more intense, at least 3 emperors are needed to ensure that this dynasty can survive for a while longer. Especially in the context of the impending catastrophe, other dynasties will never allow the birth of new dynasties, especially the Daxia Dynasty, which has only one emperor. In the eyes of any dynasty, it is a piece of cake. Therefore, Qi Zong had some doubts in his heart about whether there might be some power behind the great emperor of the Great Xia Dynasty. Otherwise, it would not be a wise move for him to create a dynasty at this time. The destiny of creating a dynasty and dividing the universe at this time is destined to be besieged by other dynasties. As an emperor, it is impossible not to know such things. Qi Zong was suspicious by nature. Although he believed that there was only one emperor in the Great Xia Dynasty, he still planned to act cautiously. Anyway, the Great Xia Dynasty is near the Qiyu Dynasty, and it doesn't take much time to reach the Great Xia Dynasty from them. Now that the Qiyu Dynasty is also in the hands of the King Yun Dynasty, it does not take much time to take over the entire Daxia Dynasty. After listening to Qi Zong's words, Qi Hongguang said, "I understand. I will arrange for someone to enter the Daxia Dynasty to inquire about the specific situation." After Qi Hongguang finished speaking, he was about to arrange for someone to go to the Great Xia Dynasty when a guard's voice came from outside the main hall, "Your Majesty, the President of the Changhong Chamber of Commerce wants to see you." Qi Hongguang said, "Bring him in." Speaking of this, Qi Hongguang looked at Qi Zong and said, "Ancestor, it seems that the Ye family can't wait any longer." Qi Zong thought thoughtfully, if we can get the full support of the Ye family, even if there is a certain force behind the Great Xia Dynasty, we don't need to worry too much. Although the Ye family of the Qiyu Dynasty is just a branch and does not even have a powerful emperor, the head of the Ye family is a superpower. If the Ye family also participated in the attack on the Great Xia Dynasty, then even if there are other forces behind the Great Xia Dynasty, they still have to consider whether it is worth offending a Ye family because of a low-level dynasty. Not long after, the guards brought Ye Xingtang to the main hall. After Ye Xingtang saw Qi Hongguang, he immediately saluted and said, "I have met Emperor Yun." Then Ye Xingtang's eyes fell on Qi Zong again. Although he didn't know Qi Zong, he could feel that Qi Zong's aura was very powerful. He bowed his hands towards Qi Zong again and saluted and said, "I have met Senior." Qi Hongguang said, "President Ye, you don't have to be polite." Qi Hongguang asked, "I wonder what happened to President Ye?" Ye Xingtang asked back, "The Ye family sent some information to His Majesty a few days ago. I wonder if Your Majesty already knows about the Great Xia Dynasty." Qi Hongguang said with a smile, "I already know." Ye Xingtang asked, "Then is Your Majesty interested in the Great Xia Dynasty?" Qi Hongguang hesitated for a moment, then pretended to be embarrassed and said, "President Ye, we haven't found Pei Tianlu's hiding place yet. He may come back at any time. If we go to attack the Xia Dynasty at this time, what if Pei Tianlu takes this opportunity to take revenge on the King Yun Dynasty?" At this point, Qi Hongguang stopped talking. Seeing Qi Hongguang's embarrassed look, Ye Xingtang laughed in his heart. He didn't believe that Qi Hongguang was not interested in the Great Xia Dynasty at all. Qi Hongguang pretended to be embarrassed, not just to get more benefits after winning the Great Xia Dynasty. Ye Xingtang said calmly, "Your Majesty, in this era, the emerging dynasty has great appeal to any dynasty. If Your Majesty is too worried, you may miss the opportunity. Maybe soon the fortune of the Great Xia Dynasty will be divided by other dynasties." Ye Xingtang will not indulge Qi Hongguang. His meaning is very clear. If Qi Hongguang is unwilling to cooperate, then the Ye family will find other dynasties to cooperate. Qi Hongguang smiled and said, "President Ye, what you said makes sense, but I want to know, does your Ye family ancestor know about the Great Xia Dynasty?" Changhong Chamber of Commerce is Changhong Chamber of Commerce, and Ye family is Ye family. Although Changhong Chamber of Commerce is the largest chamber of commerce of the Ye family, it is the ancestor of the Ye family who can make the decision on major matters, not Ye Xingtang, the president of Changhong Chamber of Commerce. Ye Xingtang said, "Of course I know. I came to King Yun Dynasty today to discuss cooperation with His Majesty. It was exactly what our ancestors wanted." When Ye Xingtang returned to Qiyu Dynasty from Xia Dynasty, he reported the affairs of Xia Dynasty to the senior management of the Ye family. The senior management of the Ye family unanimously decided to find other dynasties to cooperate and find a way to divide Xia Dynasty, especially the technology of starships, which the Ye family must obtain. Qi Hongguang asked, "Then I wonder how the Ye family plans to cooperate. As far as I know, the Ye family has no emperor so far, right? That is to say, if we really cooperate to attack Xia Dynasty, it will be King Yun Dynasty that contributes the most." Ye Xingtang smiled and said, "Who said that the Ye family has no emperor?" Hearing this, Qi Hongguang and Qi Zong were stunned at the same time. When did the Ye family have an emperor? Why didn't they have any news at all? Seeing that Qi Hongguang was obviously stunned for a moment, Ye Xingtang continued, "Not long ago, an ancestor of our Ye family successfully proved his way with the way of merchants." End of this chapter. Chapter 1018, Queen Tianhong breaks through again. Qi Hongguang and Qi Zong found it a bit incredible that the Ye family's business operation actually produced a great emperor. With a great emperor, the Ye family will have more leverage when it comes to dividing the profits. After Qi Hongguang came to his senses, he said with a smile, "Congratulations to the Ye family for having a great emperor. The Ye family will definitely be more prosperous in the future." Ye Xingtang said, "Thank you for your congratulations, Your Majesty. I wonder if the Ye family is now qualified to cooperate with the King Yun Dynasty." Qi Hongguang said, "What are President Ye saying? Even if the Ye family does not have a great emperor, it is my honor for the Ye family to cooperate with the King Yun Dynasty. Having said this, Qi Hongguang continued to ask, I just don't know how much President Ye knows about the Great Xia Dynasty. The catastrophe is approaching. It stands to reason that no great emperor will create a new dynasty at this time. This Great Xia Dynasty is probably a pawn of some forces. Ye Xinteng said, Your Majesty, don't worry. The Great Xia Dynasty is located at the edge of the universe. I believe that no big religion or holy land will leave a chess piece at the edge of the universe. As we all know, during the great catastrophe of the universe, the dynasties at the edge of the universe will be the first to bear the brunt. Even the King Yun dynasty was the first dynasty to suffer during the great catastrophe of the universe, let alone the Great Xia dynasty, a dynasty that was purely on the edge of the universe. That the great religion or the Holy Land would have nothing to do and leave chess pieces in such a place. Ye Xinteng thought of something at this time and continued, however, according to our investigation, the founder of the Great Xia dynasty was probably a reincarnated emperor. His strength increased very quickly. From the time he was born to the founding of the Great Xia dynasty, it took 500 years. No. Qi Hongguang was stunned for a moment, then said with a smile on his face, so, it is possible that the founder of the Great Xia dynasty has not fully recovered his strength. After the emperor reincarnates, it will take a long time to return to the strength of his heyday. Although it seems that the founder of the Great Xia dynasty broke through to the Great Emperor realm in less than 500 years, he only broke through to the Great Emperor realm, and his strength was definitely not up to the first level of the Great Emperor. If they attack the Great Xia dynasty now, with the strength of the King Yun dynasty and the Ye family, they can take over the entire Great Xia dynasty without any effort. Thinking of this, Qi Hongguang immediately asked, I wonder when the Ye family plans to take action against the Xia dynasty. Ye Xinteng said, then it depends on when your majesty will send troops. As long as your majesty sends troops, the great emperor of our Ye family will immediately lead his people to attack the Great Xia dynasty with his majesty. Qi Hongguang said, okay, then please ask President Ye to live in the King Yun dynasty for a while, and I will mobilize the troops right away. This. Ye Xinteng then said, did your majesty forget something? Ye Xinteng came to King Yun dynasty today to discuss cooperation with King Yun dynasty. Since they were discussing cooperation, they naturally had to mention the issue of how to distribute the benefits after winning the Great Xia dynasty. But Qi Hongguang didn't mention it at all. Qi Hongguang asked, what did you forget? Why did President Ye say this? Ye Xinteng said, how to distribute the treasures of the Xia dynasty? Why not discuss it in advance? Qi Hongguang said calmly, so that's what happened. Let's wait until the Great Xia dynasty is conquered. Qi Hongguang knew what the Ye family wanted. If the interests were divided too clearly now, after the Great Xia dynasty was conquered, the Ye family would probably take away all the relevant starship manufacturing methods as soon as possible. Anyway, the Ye family does not create a dynasty and is not very interested in the dynasty's luck. The dynasty's luck will definitely be given to the King Yun dynasty, so the King Yun dynasty is not in a hurry to make it clear how the benefits will be distributed. Just as Ye Xinteng was about to say something, Qi Hongguang's body disappeared on the spot. President Ye, I have something else to do, so I'll excuse you. Seeing Qi Hongguang running away so quickly, Ye Xinteng frowned. He also saw Qi Hongguang's little thoughts, but he couldn't say much now. Then he glanced at Qi Zong, and then saluted again, Senior, Junior, farewell. Qi Zong just nodded and said nothing more. After Ye Xinteng left the palace of the King Yun dynasty, he reported what Qi Hongguang said to the top management of the Ye family. Seeing that the King Yun dynasty agreed to cooperate, the Ye family began to prepare. At this time, Lu Chen had no idea that the Great Xia dynasty was about to face a new crisis. Xia Dynasty. Black Dragon City Palace. The bodies of Lu Chen and Empress Tianhong were still hugging each other tightly. This feeling is very wonderful, and you can experience the feeling of joy without any movement. Lu Chen even had the depraved thought that he could just go on like this forever. I have to say that the Emperor's body is different. At this moment, Empress Tianhong suddenly released a strong spiritual power. The spiritual power quickly spread out with Empress Tianhong's body as the center, and the Taoist charm on her body also spread out quickly. Almost the entire Tianchen world was affected by Empress Tianhong's body. Dao rhyme enveloped. Suddenly, all the immortal cultivators in the Tianchen world were affected by the Taoist charm of Empress Tianhong. They became extremely manic and wanted to kill. Fortunately, Empress Tianhong quickly gathered the Dao Yun on her body, so it did not cause too much trouble. After feeling the aura of Empress Tianhong, Lu Chen raised his head slightly, and their lips slowly parted. Lu Chen looked at Empress Tianhong below him and said, "Congratulations on your breakthrough again." Empress Tianhong just said him without saying much. Empress Tianhong knew very well that she was able to return to the second level of the Great Emperor's strength so quickly only because of Lu Chen's dual cultivation method. I have to admit that this dual cultivation method is indeed very different from the dual cultivation method she knew before. The dual cultivation method she knew before could not have such a good effect. She has begun to doubt whether Lu Chen is from this universe. She seems to owe more and more debts. If she practices normally, it will take her at least 1,000 years to recover to the second level of the Emperor. After breaking through the Emperor, every step of the Emperor is a huge hurdle. However, in just a few years, she relied on the dual cultivation method given by Lu Chen to break through. This is another huge cause and effect. Even if Lu Chen's life for life is realized, and she gave birth to a child for Lu Chen, she still owes debts. Tianhong Empress has a complicated heart. She is a great emperor who masters killing. She does not rely on killing to accumulate evil spirits to break through her cultivation, but relies on dual cultivation to improve her cultivation. But at this moment, Tianhong Empress found that the evil spirit on her body seemed very strong. What's going on? She has been locked up with Lu Chen for the past few years, and she has not gone out to kill people, so how can there be such a strong evil spirit on her body? She just thought that it was because of the improvement of her cultivation through dual cultivation. Now it seems that it is not only the dual cultivation that has improved her cultivation, but also because the evil spirit in her body has accumulated to a certain extent, which led to her breakthrough. But where did this evil spirit come from? Empress Tianhong immediately closed her eyes and sensed the source of the evil spirit. Soon she traced where the evil spirit came from. In her lower abdomen, there was a continuous flow of evil spirit. In the past few years when she was locked up with Lu Chen, her body killed countless lives, and these evil spirits came from those lives. End of this chapter. Chapter 1019 Lu Chen attains enlightenment and becomes emperor. The Rainbow Queen was stunned for a moment. She had never thought that she could accumulate evil spirits in this way, and relying on this method to accumulate evil spirits was faster than killing enemies in the outer domain battlefield. If she continued to practice in this way, wouldn't her strength soon be able to recover to the peak period? But when she thought that she practiced in this way, the Rainbow Queen felt strange. In theory, only by killing creatures with spiritual intelligence can evil spirits be accumulated. The seeds of life are just seeds, and they have no spiritual intelligence. How can such heavy evil spirits be generated after killing them? This made her a little confused. Could it be that these seeds of life have already possessed some spiritual intelligence? At this moment, the spiritual power in the bodies of the two people ran a cycle again, and then the spiritual power of Lu Chen's life in his body rushed to the Rainbow Queen frantically. The Rainbow Queen tried to stabilize her restless spiritual power, and then observed the whole process of the generation of evil spirits. Those evil spirits did come from the seeds of life. But this can't be blamed on her. She is the Empress who masters killing. There is the Dao rhyme of killing in her body. Those seeds of life will be destroyed directly after they come into contact with those Dao rhymes. Even if she does nothing, those seeds of life cannot survive in her body, so it is not easy to breed new life. Unless there is a special seed of life that can withstand the power of killing. Thinking of this, the Tianhong Empress suddenly felt a little excited. Just think about it, if a seed of life that can withstand the power of killing grows up one day in the future, how powerful it will be. At this moment, Lu Chen felt a little weak. Even with the cultivation of the Quasi Emperor, Lu Chen could not bear it. He continuously converted spiritual power into life force, and then sent it to the Tianhong Empress. Although his body was also absorbing the spiritual energy from the outside world, and then converted the spiritual energy into spiritual power, trying to form a balanced cycle. But the Tianhong Empress absorbed too much life force, and he could not keep up with the pace of the Tianhong Empress. This competition is not about physical strength, but about cultivation and spiritual power. As a quasi-emperor, he naturally cannot be the opponent of a great emperor. Lu Chen also admires the Rainbow Queen. Among his women, only the Rainbow Queen can completely refine his life force. Lu Chen sighed in his heart, not knowing when he would be able to glimpse the way of creation and become an emperor. Just when Lu Chen was in a low mood, suddenly, he seemed to feel a green life force spreading out of the body of the Rainbow Queen. This life force assimilated the killing power of the Rainbow Queen. The next moment, a white light flashed in front of Lu Chen's eyes, and he fell into temporary blindness. When Lu Chen regained his vision again, he found himself in a wild world. Seeing the illusion in front of him, Lu Chen thought to himself, could it be that what he will see next is the whole process of the birth of a creature? Just as Lu Chen was thinking this, some green plant seedlings emerged from the land of this wild world. The growth rate of those plant seedlings was very fast. In just a moment, the originally desolate land turned into a grassland. After another moment, the original grassland turned into a dense forest. Then countless animals appeared in the forest, and those animals were breeding in groups. Seeing this scene, Lu Chen was stunned. However, at this moment, a series of green taurimes swayed in front of Lu Chen's eyes. Lu Chen's consciousness began to become blurred. In the hazy, he seemed to hear the sound of thump-thump, and then he saw countless lives walking out of the wild world he had seen before and heading towards the entire universe. Lu Chen felt as if there was some connection between him and these lives, as if they were all created by himself, and as if they came from themselves. These lives became a whole at this moment. At this time, a voice echoed in Lu Chen's mind again. Tao gave birth to 1, 1 gave birth to 2, 2 gave birth to 3, and 3 gave birth to all things. After this voice sounded, Lu Chen felt as if he had grasped something particularly important. Lu Chen suddenly understood that this was the way of creation he was looking for. At this time, the illusions he saw began to shrink, and in a very short time, they shrank into a black sphere, and everything returned to chaos. In the darkness, he once again heard the thump-thump sound similar to the beating of a heart. In a trance, Lu Chen saw a seed of life fall into a soft soil, and began to take root and sprout, and the seed of life was also growing rapidly. Not long after, the seed of life grew into a human shape. After the man opened his eyes and saw that he was in the darkness, he subconsciously stretched out his palm to grab a ball of black matter from the void, and pinched it into an axe, and chopped it out with an axe. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audio Wave. Chaos separated, countless substances erupted, forming vortex nebulae, and these nebulae turned into life worlds in a very short time. At this time, Lu Chen did not know that a road appeared in the sky of Tianchen world, and around the road were pairs of creatures that were carrying out reproduction activities. Feeling the thriving vitality in her body, Empress Tianhong sat on the couch in a daze. She could clearly feel that a life was forming in her body, and that life was growing very fast. It turned into a human form in just a blink of an eye. After Tianhong Empress came back to her senses, she looked at Lu Chen with mixed feelings. Seeing the green Dao rime emanating from Lu Chen, she knew that Lu Chen had succeeded in proving the Dao. Lu Chen was indeed not lying. He used his body to comprehend the Dao of creation by creating a new life. She had lived for countless years, and this was the first time she saw someone become an emperor in this way. She was really enlightened. At this time, all the creatures in the Tianchen world were infected by Lu Chen's Dao rhyme and had the idea of wanting to reproduce. After seeing the strange phenomena in the sky, the people in the Tianchen world blushed, and the cultivators were very confused. Who was breaking through and causing such a shameless phenomenon? At this time, Lu Chen's wives and concubines had already rushed to Black Dragon City. When the strange phenomenon appeared, their hearts became restless, and their minds were full of Lu Chen. And at this moment, the subworlds in their bodies also underwent earth-shaking changes, and the life cultivation of the subworlds was growing rapidly. Afterwards, the strange phenomenon in the sky of Tianchen world lasted for a whole day, and it was not until the evening that the strange phenomenon in the sky slowly dissipated. Although the strange phenomenon dissipated, under the influence of Lu Chen's Dao Yun, the population of Tianchen world will surge in the next year. When Lu Chen opened his eyes again, he found that his perception had covered the entire Xia Dynasty, even the Huangshan star region was within his perception range. Lu Chen suddenly felt that all this seemed like a dream. Did he break through just like that? End of this chapter. Chapter 1020. This is what I was born with. Seeing Lu Chen's confused look, Empress Tianhong felt a little funny. She now seriously doubted whether Lu Chen did not think that he could become an emperor through this method at the beginning. Empress Tianhong said coldly at this time, "You have broken through, it's over." Hearing Empress Tianhong's words, Lu Chen came back to his senses, but he did not withdraw. He clearly sensed that a life appeared in Empress Tianhong's body and had taken shape. The child took a human form as soon as he was conceived, probably because of the influence of the Dao rhyme of the way of creation. At this time, Empress Tianhong continued, "I will kill this child." Lu Chen was stunned for a moment. After reacting, Lu Chen hurriedly said, "No." Empress Tianhong looked at Lu Chen coldly and said, "Your original purpose was just to prove the Dao. Now that your purpose has been achieved, there is no need to keep him." Empress Tianhong did not really want to give Lu Chen a child. At first, she did expect that the child who could resist the killing power would be so strong when he was born, but when the child was formed, she suddenly found that the child was actually absorbing the killing power in her body. In other words, if the child continued to exist in her body, it would not only affect her cultivation, but also cause her cultivation to decline. She finally recovered some strength, but she didn't want to go back. Lu Chen was speechless. This woman was too cruel. It was not easy to make the emperor pregnant with a child, and he didn't want the first son of the emperor to die. I was able to succeed in proving the Tao because I observed the whole process of his pregnancy. If you kill him like this, how can I repay the karma? Hearing Lu Chen's words, Tianhong Empress reacted. Indeed, Lu Chen owed a lot of karma, and it was not so easy to repay the karma of proving the Tao. But then again, this karma was contaminated by Lu Chen. What does it have to do with her? The Rainbow Queen said, "This has nothing to do with me." She only wanted to preserve her cultivation now. As for how Lu Chen would repay the karma, that was not her concern. Seeing that the Rainbow Queen was adamant and determined to abort the child, Lu Chen's mouth corners slightly raised. Then he said, "If you really want to kill him, then kill him. If he dies, I will definitely avenge him in order to repay the karma. My revenge method is very simple, just keep the master-servant contract." The Rainbow Queen frowned and said coldly, "You want to break your promise?" Lu Chen said, "There is no way. I can't see my child die in your belly." Hearing this, the Rainbow Queen stared at Lu Chen, and the murderous aura emanating from her body enveloped the entire bedroom. After a while, Empress Tianhong said, "He is absorbing the killing power in my body. If this continues, my cultivation will drop significantly." Lu Chen said, I don't believe that the speed at which a newly formed fetus absorbs the killing power can catch up with the speed at which you condense the killing power. Empress Tianhong fell into deep thought. Lu Chen was right. Although the speed at which the fetus in her belly absorbed the killing power was indeed very fast, it was indeed far behind the speed at which she condensed the killing power. But if she wants to condense the killing power, she needs evil spirit. Now that she is in the Great Xia Dynasty, there is no war and she cannot kill people at will. Where can she absorb the evil spirit? Wait. It seems that there is a place to absorb the evil spirit. But when she thought that she had to maintain this close relationship with Lu Chen, Empress Tianhong felt a little annoyed. It was not easy to help Lu Chen succeed in proving the Tao, and she could be considered to have repaid the cause and effect, but in the end she had to continue to connect with Lu Chen. But on second thought, judging from the effect of her and Lu Chen's dual cultivation, even if she went to the outer realm, the speed of recovering her cultivation through fighting could not catch up with the speed of recovering her cultivation through dual cultivation with Lu Chen. If she wanted to quickly recover her cultivation to the peak period, dual cultivation with Lu Chen was indeed the best choice, but as an emperor who proved his way through killing, it was really hard for her to accept that she had to stay with a man all the time. Seeing that Empress Tianhong was silent and seemed to be thinking about something, Lu Chen continued, "Actually, if you think about it carefully, you still have karma that you haven't settled. Look, I saved your life, and you helped me become an emperor. This is just repaying a karma, and you haven't settled the karma of me helping you become an emperor. Of course, I can't force you to repay if you don't want to. After all, you are already an emperor. You can use the power of an emperor to completely cut off the karma between me and you." Empress Tianhong came back to her senses at this time, and she said expressionlessly, "No need to say, I will give birth to the child." Empress Tianhong thought to herself, "Anyway, it's only 10 months, although her cultivation may decline, it is estimated that it will not decline much. After the child is born, the karma she owes will probably be repaid, and then she will be free. 10 months is nothing for an emperor. The emperor's retreat is in units of 10,000 years, so she can still wait for this little time." But she had been lying under Lu Chen for so many years, and she felt very uncomfortable. Now she wanted to find someone to fight. Tianhong Empress said, "Tell the emperor who surrendered to you that I want to fight with him." Lu Chen said, "This is not good. After all, you still have a child in your belly. You should wait until the child is born before doing such dangerous things." The Rainbow Queen said coldly, "I am a great emperor, not a mortal." The Rainbow Queen's implication was that she was not as delicate as those mortals. Lu Chen felt the restless killing power in the Rainbow Queen's body and understood that the Rainbow Queen wanted to fight now. Lu Chen said, "How about I spar with you?" The Rainbow Queen said, "You can't." Lu Chen laughed, "You are provoking me. He is now a great emperor after all, and the Rainbow Queen actually said that he can't do it. As a man, how can he bear it?" The Rainbow Queen continued, "I won't attack you." In the eyes of the Rainbow Queen, Lu Chen's method of relying on women to prove the truth has no strength even if it succeeds, and he still comprehends the way of creation, and he really has no fighting power. But Pei Tianlu is different. Pei Tianlu comprehends the way of power. His fighting power is stronger than that of ordinary earth. Fighting with such a person can completely vent the gloomy emotions accumulated in her heart over the years. Lu Chen thought for a moment, then said, "Okay, I don't mind if you want to spar with him, but you should be more restrained when you spar, and stay away from the Great Xia Dynasty." After the voice fell, Lu Chen sent a voice message to Pei Tianlu, "Mr. Pei, I have a concubine who wants to spar with you to test your own strength. How have you recovered now?" Hearing Lu Chen's words, Pei Tianlu in the secret room was stunned. Spar? He is a great emperor, and he proposed to spar with him, so the other party must be at least a great emperor, right? Pei Tianlu sent a voice message and asked, I wonder what level that lady is now. Lu Chen replied, the second level of the Great Emperor. Pei Tianlu said, okay, then please ask that lady to choose a star field. Pei Tianlu did not refuse. Although his strength has not fully recovered, this is Lu Chen's proposal after all. As Lu Chen's servant, he should naturally agree. End of this chapter. Chapter 1021 New Body. After seeing Pei Tianlu agree, Lu Chen immediately said to the Tianhong Empress, Old Pei agrees. The Tianhong Empress then pushed Lu Chen's chest away and got up directly from the couch. Then she waved her hand, and the filth and impurities on her body were instantly cleaned up. Her body was changed into a red phoenix robe, and the whole person looked noble and proud. Seeing this scene, Lu Chen immediately became interested again. He had just broken through the Great Emperor, and the deficit in the past few years was instantly replenished. Now Lu Chen is full of energy, so it is no problem for him to continue fighting with the Tianhong Empress for a few years. However, sensing that there were still a group of wives and concubines waiting for him outside, Lu Chen did not force the Tianhong Empress to stay. In order to prove his Dao and become an emperor, he has not been close to his wives and concubines for several years. Now that he has become an emperor, it is time to make up for them. At this time, the Tianhong Empress turned her head slightly and glanced at Lu Chen on the couch indifferently, and then her body disappeared on the spot. After the Tianhong Empress left, Pei Tianlu's breath also disappeared from the Tianchen world. Lu Chen was not interested in the fight between the two. He just wanted to create a new body quickly and get rid of the blood influence of the Shenyu Emperor. Then Lu Chen circulated his spiritual power, and lines of Dao patterns gradually emerged around his body, and the entire palace was filled with Dao rhyme. The plants in the yard outside the palace were also affected by these Dao rhymes and began to grow wildly. Zhou Yuyu saw that the plants in the yard were growing wildly, and immediately reminded others, look at those flowers. The women's eyes fell on the plants in the yard. The next moment, they saw that the plants were growing visibly, and the original flower buds gradually opened, and the whole yard was full of vitality. At the same time, the women also felt that their bodies became very relaxed, and some problems left by their bodies during the original practice also disappeared at this moment. Yun Xianxian murmured, he really succeeded. Yun Xiangxian's main body was originally the emperor, so she more or less inherited some memories of the emperor. She could clearly feel the avenue of life overflowing from the room. When she saw the strange phenomenon in the sky before, she felt that Lu Chen had broken through, but she still couldn't believe it. After all, it was unheard of to break through in this way. But from the power of the avenue emanating from the room, Lu Chen might have really become an emperor. Yun Xianxian frowned slightly at this time, thinking to herself, this doesn't seem to be the avenue of life? Although the overflowing Dao rhyme has a strong life force, which gave birth to the plants in the yard, Lu Chen's life path is not pure, and there seems to be something else in it. Yun Xianxian felt that Lu Chen's life path seemed to be integrated into a certain avenue. Although it was not a pure life path, Lu Chen's avenue power also contained the power to revive life. Yun Xianxian released her spiritual power without hesitation to explore the situation in the bedroom. She sensed that Lu Chen was reshaping his body, and Yun Xianxian immediately stopped exploring. At this time, Chen Wanrong looked at Yun Xianxian and asked nervously, Master, what happened to His Majesty? Yun Xianxian replied, he succeeded in proving his Dao and is now a great emperor. Hearing Yun Xiangxian's words, the women in the courtyard were stunned at first, and when they came to their senses, they were all very excited. Great, His Majesty really succeeded. I knew His Majesty would not lie to us. I didn't expect that what His Majesty said was true. Then His Majesty has become even more powerful. The courtyard instantly became lively, and Yun Xianxian hurriedly reminded, His Majesty is shaping a new body, so please don't disturb him for the time being. As soon as these words came out, the women instantly quieted down and stood quietly waiting. They were actually a little nervous in their hearts. No one knew whether Lu Chen would change his temperament after becoming an emperor. They had heard a lot about the emperor. It was rumored that after a cultivator became an emperor, his temperament would change drastically and become very indifferent. Moreover, Lu Chen's method of proving the Dao was to rely on women. Now that Lu Chen had successfully proved the Dao, they seemed to have lost their value. Some people showed anxiety on their faces when they thought that Lu Chen would abandon them. At the same time, in the bedroom, Lu Chen's new body was slowly forming. Seeing the new body, Lu Chen suddenly thought of something. Why didn't he take this opportunity to create a few more bodies? In the past, he felt that he had always been alone and was a little too busy. Now that he has become an emperor, his mental power has become stronger, and there is no problem controlling several bodies at the same time. Moreover, he can use the saint-level puppet technique to control those bodies, so that those bodies at least have the strength of saints. When he used puppetry to create flesh puppets, he had already had the idea of using the puppet flesh to have sex with his wives and concubines, but the puppet flesh he created at that time had to borrow external objects, and the flesh was not pure. Moreover, at that time, the soul power was not enough. Even if there was no problem controlling two flesh bodies at the same time, when doing physical work, the feeling of the body was still a little bit behind. It was like giving a command to move, but the body took a moment to react. There was a certain delay between the soul command and the action of the body. But now it was different. With the strength of the emperor's soul, as long as there were not too many clones and they were not too far apart, there would be no delay. Thinking of this, Lu Chen slowly raised his other hand and created another body at the same time. The body created by the way of creation and the power of the origin completely belongs to him. From now on, no matter which clone it is, it will be him. As time passed, two bodies exactly like Lu Chen appeared in the room. Lu Chen did not hesitate at all and directly transferred his soul. The next moment, his soul appeared on one of the created bodies. When the soul and the new body merged, Lu Chen's body suddenly burst out with a terrifying power. Then, the whole Tianchen world once again appeared, the vision of all things reproducing offspring. Lu Chen looked at his body in disbelief. He just gave up his original body, and his realm actually broke through to the second level of the emperor? It seems that the blood of the Shenwu emperor has a great influence. However, from now on, he no longer has to worry about the influence of the blood of the Shenwu emperor. He can have as many children as he wants in the future. Lu Chen was stunned for a moment. He patted his forehead and felt very speechless about himself. Why is he still thinking about having a baby at this time? He is a great emperor after all, so he should have some pursuits. After coming to his senses, Lu Chen used the saint-level puppet technique to refine the body next to him into a flesh puppet. While refining, he thought that now he has reached the second level of the great emperor, so the strength of the flesh puppet should be close to the quasi-emperor realm, right? Just when Lu Chen was distracted, the flesh puppet was successfully refined. Lu Chen separated a trace of his soul into the flesh puppet, and then he controlled the two flesh bodies to walk around in the room. With the power of the great emperor's soul, there is no problem with doing two things at the same time, and Lu Chen felt very satisfied. Then he waved his hand, and both flesh bodies wore black and gold dragon robes. End of this chapter. Chapter 1022. Tell me what has happened over the years. While Lu Chen was getting familiar with his new body in the room, Music Xuan and others were waiting anxiously in the yard. On the one hand, they hoped that the door in front of them would open quickly. After all, they had not seen Lu Chen for many years. In addition, they were all influenced by the Dao rhyme of Lu Chen's life avenue just now, and they all wanted to have a good chat with Lu Chen now. But at the same time, they were worried that after the door was opened, the person who walked out would no longer be the previous Lu Chen, but a cold and ruthless emperor. In the room, Lu Chen smiled happily after feeling the great power of the flesh puppet. He originally thought that the flesh puppet had the strength close to that of a quasi-emperor at most, but he did not expect that the strength of his clone had reached the level of a great emperor. Is the saint-level puppetry so amazing? If he created more flesh bodies, wouldn't the Great Xia Dynasty be full of great emperors in the future? Thinking of this, Lu Chen was not in a hurry to leave the room. He used the way of creation again to create a new flesh body. Soon, 2 more bodies were created. Just when he was full of hope to turn these 2 bodies into puppet bodies, his mind trembled. Then, a feeling of soul tearing came, which made Lu Chen feel miserable. However, Lu Chen finally completed the refining of the puppet, but when he controlled the newly refined body, he found that the new body only had the strength of a quasi-emperor. Lu Chen instantly understood what was going on. Although he could use puppetry to create many clones, his soul strength could not support the power of so many bodies. The power that his soul could mobilize was within a range, and at most he could only control 2 bodies with the strength of the emperor at the same time. If he continued to increase his power, his soul would not be able to withstand the backlash of the power of 3 emperors. When the soul could not suppress the power of the body, the soul would feel torn, that is, it would be backlashed. After figuring out what was going on, Lu Chen sighed slightly, and his plan to mass-produce emperors was scrapped. Originally, he thought that relying on the strength of his great emperor's soul, he could control more great emperor's clones at the same time, but he didn't expect that the soul would be affected by the sum of the clone's power. Never mind, 2 great emperors' bodies are enough. Then Lu Chen refined another body. This time, he deliberately controlled his power and refined that body into a quasi-emperor level body. When refining, his soul also produced a slight tearing feeling. In this way, Lu Chen alone has 2 great emperors' bodies and 2 quasi-emperors' bodies. Lu Chen originally planned to continue to create new bodies, but found that the life force and source power in his body had been almost consumed, so Lu Chen had to give up. The current 4 bodies are completely enough. Thinking of this, Lu Chen put on the platinum dragon robes for the 2 quasi-emperors' bodies, and then the 4 people walked out of the room at the same time. When the door of the Tianhong female emperor's bedroom slowly opened, the women in the yard stared at the door. Seeing Lu Chen, who was too black and 200, walk out of the room, everyone was stunned for a moment. Yun Xianxian could clearly feel that the aura of these 4 people was the same, but the pressure they exuded was different. Yun Xianxian asked in confusion, "Why did you create so many clones?" The 4 Lu Chens laughed and said in unison, "It's been a long time since I cultivated feelings with my wives. I'm afraid I can't handle it alone." Hearing Lu Chen's words, some women in the courtyard blushed instantly. They were worried that Lu Chen would change a lot just now, but now it seems that they thought too much. Lu Chen released his spiritual consciousness and explored the changes in the entire Xia Dynasty. During the years of seclusion, the technology of the Xia Dynasty has made certain progress, and many technological equipment that rely on spiritual energy have appeared. The deep integration of technology and cultivation has allowed the Xia Dynasty to embark on a new development path. At this time, Lu Chen said to Bai Qingqing, "Xiao Bai, let's go to the imperial study." After the voice fell, Lu Chen controlled a great emperor's body, took Bai Qingqing out of the yard, and went to the imperial study. Now he has 4 bodies, and he can do 4 things at the same time. He plans to go to the imperial study to see the policy report of the court during his years of retreat. After a body and Bai Qingqing left, Lu Chen glanced at the wives and concubines present. Most of his women were present. "Ladies, let's go to another place to have a good talk." While speaking, Lu Chen waved his hand, and their bodies disappeared on the spot. When they appeared again, they had arrived at the Fenjiun Hall of Yancheng. Looking at the empty hall and the big bed next to the hall, Lu Chen couldn't help but feel a little emotional. In the past, he had to gather with his wives and concubines for meetings almost every year. He didn't expect that this retreat would take so many years. Perhaps as his cultivation level gets higher and higher, and there are more and more things, he and his wives and concubines will gather together for meetings less and less in the future. Seeing three Lu Chen standing in the hall, Mu Zixuan and the others didn't know what to do for a moment. It was the first time for them to face three Lu Chens, and they always felt a little weird. At this time, a Lu Chen came to the dragon chair just above the Fenjian Hall and sat down. Okay, ladies, let's talk about what happened in the past few years. After the words fell, the two Lu Chens in the quasi-emperor realm did not hesitate at all, and directly hugged Chu Yukan and Yun Xianxian one by one, and took them to the big bed. Seeing this scene, Lu Chen's wives and concubines looked at each other, and then several people followed. Lu Chen, who was sitting on the dragon chair, did not move. Mu Zixuan instantly understood what Lu Chen meant, so she asked the imperial kitchen to prepare a large amount of wine and food. Those who did not go to the big bed sat on the seats on both sides of the hall. Mu Zixuan came to the dragon chair and poured a glass of wine for Lu Chen. Lu Chen hugged Mu Zixuan's waist and said while drinking, "How have the children been doing in the past few years of my seclusion?" Mu Zixuan replied, "They have all found what they want to do and have a fulfilling life." Lu Chen put down the wine glass and asked, "No one with ulterior motives is approaching them?" Hearing Lu Chen's question, Zhou Xiao, who was below the hall, was stunned for a moment, and she immediately thought of her disappointing son. Mu Zixuan smiled and said, "They are all His Majesty's children, so naturally there will be many people with ulterior motives who want to get close to them, but His Majesty has reminded them before, and now they can handle the relationship with those forces very well." The main body Lu Chen was about to say something when a shout came from the side, and then a feeling of joy spread all over his body. At the same time, Lu Chen, who was in the imperial study with Bai Qingqing, also felt that joyful feeling. Lu Chen was delighted, and he didn't expect that this feeling could be superimposed. Now there are only 2 clones working. If there are more clones in the future, and they work at the same time, the feeling is unimaginable. At this time, Mu Zixuan, who was next to the main body Lu Chen, glanced at what was happening next to the hall with the corner of her eyes, and her face was immediately covered with red clouds. End of this chapter. Chapter 1023 Reminder from Empress Tianhong. After seeing Mu Zixuan's shy state, Lu Chen smiled slightly. He could now clearly sense the restless spiritual power in Mu Zixuan and the others. He also guessed that Mu Zixuan and the others were probably influenced by their own path of creation, so they became very interested. Master Lu Chen picked up the wine glass, took another sip of wine, then patted Mu Zixuan's butt and said, "Zixuan, just do whatever you want." Hearing Lu Chen's words, Mu Zixuan's cheeks became even more rosy, so red that they were almost dripping with water. The people still sitting in the main hall are basically thin-skinned people. Although they also want to communicate with Lu Chen, they are still a little reluctant to let go of such a crowded scene. However, after receiving Lu Chen's approval, Mu Zixuan finally chose to place her jade hand on Lu Chen's chest, and then slowly moved downward to arouse Lu Chen's interest. It didn't take long for Mu Zixuan to hang in Lu Chen's arms, but Lu Chen still didn't forget to ask his wives and concubines about what happened in the past few years, especially about the children. In the imperial study room, when Lu Chen was reviewing the policy address, he would exhale long and deep from time to time, making people feel as if he was doing something. Under the influence of Lu Chen, Bai Qingqing's cold face was filled with blush. At this time, Lu Chen suddenly raised his head and looked at Bai Qingqing beside him. Bai Qingqing was wearing a white tight-waisted split dress with a high ponytail, and her slender legs were vaguely visible between the skirts. Seeing that Bai Qingqing's body seemed to be trembling slightly, Lu Chen smiled and said, "Xiao Bai, you are dishonest. You are thinking wildly in the imperial study." Seeing Lu Chen directly say what she was thinking, Bai Qingqing suddenly felt extremely ashamed. In the past few years, Lu Chen had been in seclusion, and she had never had such thoughts. But for some reason, Lu Chen just came out of seclusion today, and some of her inner thoughts became active. She felt that if she continued like this, she might not be able to control herself. At this moment, Lu Chen suddenly stretched out his hand and pulled the standing Bai Qingqing into his arms. Bai Qingqing was stunned for a moment, then Lu Chen held Bai Qingqing's jade head and kissed her red lips directly. Bai Qingqing did not resist, but instead raised her slender arms and hugged Lu Chen's arms. Lu Chen thought to himself that it seems that it is indeed difficult to concentrate on 4 tasks today. Today, he can only concentrate on 1 task. It took almost 5 days for Lu Chen to ease the longing for him among his wives and concubines, so he let his body in the imperial study room continue to review the policy report of the Great Xia Dynasty. When Lu Chen started reviewing the policy report again, he sensed 2 powerful auras suddenly appearing in the Tianchen world. Lu Chen in the imperial study room immediately left the imperial study room and appeared in the sky. As soon as he flew into the air, he saw Pei Tianlu, who was covered in injuries, saluting Empress Tianhong with a depressed look on his face and said, "Thank you, Senior, for your advice." Pei Tianlu didn't know how he came here these days. He originally thought that the competition was because Empress Tianhong had just made a breakthrough and wanted to experience the power of the Emperor. As a result, as soon as he and Empress Tianhong arrived at a Death Star field, Empress Tianhong chased him with a killing sword condensed with killing power. He didn't even know when he had offended Empress Tianhong. The most important thing is that he is no match for Empress Tianhong. Even if he tried his best, he could not block Empress Tianhong's attack. Too brutal. He is worthy of being an emperor who proves his way through killing. Empress Tianhong looked indifferent at this time. She had been suppressed by Lu Chen for several years, and the anger accumulated in her heart had not been completely released. However, after some discussions with Pei Tianlu, she felt a little better. Lu Chen glanced at Empress Tianhong and then at Pei Tianlu. Just as he was about to say something, Pei Tianlu saluted him and said, "Greetings to your Majesty." Lu Chen said calmly, "No courtesy. Mr. Pei, are you okay?" After the words fell, Lu Chen came to Pei Tianlu and used his spiritual power to explore Pei Tianlu's body. This exploration shocked Lu Chen. Pei Tianlu not only injured his physical body, but also his soul was severely damaged to a certain extent. Lu Chen glanced at Empress Tianhong again. Empress Tianhong didn't have any injuries on her body. What was going on here and there? It was just a one-sided beating. Lu Chen also saw that Empress Tianhong was venting the anger she had accumulated over the years. He patted Pei Tianlu on the shoulder with some shame and said, "Thank you for your hard work, Mr. Pei." While speaking, Lu Chen used the power of life to help Pei Tianlu repair the damage to his body. In just a moment, all the injuries on Pei Tianlu's body disappeared, and even the damaged soul was repaired. After realizing that he had recovered, Pei Tianlu quickly said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." "Well, Mr. Pei, you should go back and have a good rest." Pei Tianlu said, "My subordinates resign." As soon as the words fell, Pei Tianlu's body disappeared instantly, as fast as he was running away. After Pei Tianlu left, Lu Chen waved his hand, and he and Empress Tianhong returned to Empress Tianhong's palace. Entering the bedroom, Lu Chen asked with a playful smile, "Hong Hong, it's time for you to vent your anger, right?" Empress Tianhong didn't even look at Lu Chen, and walked directly to the soft couch to meditate and practice. Seeing that Empress Tianhong ignored him, Lu Chen was not angry. He also came to the soft couch and sat down, looking sideways at Empress Tianhong's cold and beautiful face. "Hong Hong, you have a baby in your belly. You can no longer exercise strenuously in the future." Empress Tianhong still ignored Lu Chen. She was still angry. As an emperor who controlled killing, she actually wanted to give birth to a child for a lustful man. Killing represents death to a certain extent, while giving birth to children is related to the way of life. In a certain way, Having children means deviating from the way one cultivates. Although it was to repay karma, she still felt a little uncomfortable inside. Lu Chen also realized the real reason why Empress Tianhong refused to have a child, but there was no way. Since the child was already pregnant, and he relied on the child's pregnancy process to achieve enlightenment, he could not do it. As for Empress Tianhong, he can compensate her to the maximum extent. Seeing that Empress Tianhong still ignored him, Lu Chen was about to say something more when Empress Tianhong suddenly said, "Some dynasties have discovered the Great Xia Dynasty, and you have a lot of things to do next." Hearing Empress Tianhong's reminder, Lu Chen asked doubtfully, "What do you mean?" Empress Tianhong closed her eyes and replied, "When I was sparring with Pei Tianlu, I had a premonition that an emperor was quickly approaching the Great Xia Dynasty. If it weren't for the fact that she noticed that an emperor was approaching the Great Xia Dynasty, Empress Tianhong would not have ended the sparring so quickly. She had a premonition that there would be a real battle next, so she ended the sparring early and came back to cultivate. She masters the art of killing, is particularly sensitive to war, and can foresee wars that may occur in the near future." At this time, Lu Chen's expression became a little more serious. He did not doubt the authenticity of what Empress Tianhong said. Since Empress Tianhong reminded her, there is a high probability that it is true. End of chapter. Chapter 1024 Showdown with Chu Yunzi. After hearing the reminder from Empress Tianhong, Lu Chen fell into deep thought. He thought that the emperor who came to the Great Xia Dynasty must not be his vicious father. Although he had reached the second level of the Great Emperor, with his little strength, he was far from being a match for the old-fashioned late-stage Great Emperor like Emperor Shenyu. In addition to Emperor Shenyu, the emperor who would come to the Great Xia Dynasty should be the emperor of the King Yun Dynasty. After the King Yun Dynasty took control of the Red Moon Dynasty, it must have noticed the existence of the Great Xia Dynasty. Lu Chen now has a preliminary understanding of the entire universe, and he knows how attractive the emerging dynasties like the Great Xia Dynasty are to those old-fashioned dynasties. If it is the emperor of the King Yun Dynasty who attacks, he will not find it strange at all. Then Lu Chen glanced at Empress Tianhong, then stood up and said, "I won't disturb you from practicing." Lu Chen did not ask Empress Tianhong how she knew that the emperor was coming. After all, she was also a great emperor, and it was normal for her to have some special means to predict future dangers. The most urgent task is to find out whether the attacking emperor is the emperor of Shenyu or the King Yun Dynasty. Then Lu Chen sent a message to the Zhanlong army of the Daxia Dynasty, asking them to send troops to leave the Daxia Dynasty to explore the situation in the surrounding star fields, and to tell him immediately if a strong man approaches. At the same time, Lu Chen returned to the imperial study and summoned Pei Tianlu, who was about to retreat. "Mr. Pei, come to the imperial study. I have something to ask you." Hearing Lu Chen's voice, Pei Tianlu was a little confused. Lu Chen didn't ask him in front of him just now, so why did he suddenly have a question to ask him now? Pei Tianlu didn't hesitate and went to the imperial study immediately. After entering the imperial study, Pei Tianlu observed Lu Chen's expression and found that Lu Chen frowned and looked a little unhappy. Pei Tianlu's heart suddenly jumped. Could it be that the Empress said something bad about him in front of Lu Chen? Otherwise, Lu Chen was fine before, why did Lu Chen's face become so ugly after he left for a while? Pei Tianlu asked tentatively, "I wonder what your Majesty wants to see me for?" Lu Chen asked directly, "When you were sparring with the Tianhong Empress, did you sense that there was an emperor approaching the Great Xia Dynasty?" "This. Your Majesty, I did not sense that there was an emperor approaching the Great Xia Dynasty." At this point, Pei Tianlu asked curiously, "I wonder how your Majesty knew that there was an emperor approaching the Great Xia Dynasty?" Lu Chen did not answer Pei Tianlu's question, but continued to ask, "How many emperors are there in the King Yun Dynasty?" Pei Tianlu replied, "As far as I know, there are 3 emperors." Lu Chen thought about it. If there were only 3 emperors, it would not be a threat. They already have 3 emperors now, and the Tianhong Empress, who is a great emperor who masters killing, must be stronger than ordinary emperors. In addition, he has a great emperor clone. Even if the 3 emperors of the King Yun dynasty attack the Great Xia Dynasty at the same time, they can easily deal with it. But I am afraid that it is not the King Yun dynasty that is coming, but the Shen Yu emperor. It seems that he has to confront Chu Yukin directly. He wants to find out the current situation of the Emperor Shen Yu through Chu Yukin's main body Chu Yunzi. Thinking of this, Lu Chen said, Mr. Pei, go down and prepare. Soon there will be an emperor arriving at the Great Xia Dynasty, but I can't be sure whether the person coming is an enemy or a friend. Pei Tianluo was stunned for a moment, then bowed and said, I understand, I will take my leave. Pei Tianluo was also curious about how Lu Chen knew that there was an emperor approaching the Great Xia Dynasty, but he didn't ask much. He vaguely guessed that this might be related to the Tianhong Empress. When he thought of the Tianhong Empress, Pei Tianluo felt trembling all over. He thought to himself that if the person coming was the emperor of the King Yun dynasty, then the King Yun dynasty would probably be in big trouble next. When he thought of the scene where the 3 emperors of the King Yun dynasty were chased and chopped by the Tianhong Empress, Pei Tianluo felt physically and mentally comfortable. Of course, everything is still just speculation now. No one can say for sure who the emperor who is approaching the Great Xia Dynasty is. However, Pei Tianluo hopes that the person who comes is the emperor of the King Yun Dynasty. After Pei Tianluo left the imperial study, Lu Chen's main body came to Chu Yukin's side. At this time, Chu Yukin was still on the big bed in Fenjiayun Palace. She was limp on the bed, her breath was like orchid, her veil was half pulled up, and she was full of charm. Seeing Lu Chen's main body approaching her again, Chu Yukin's body trembled slightly. Even if it was the quasi-emperor's second body, Chu Yukin couldn't bear it now, not to mention that it was Lu Chen's emperor body that came this time. Chu Yukin hurriedly said, Chener, I suddenly remembered that there are some things. I won't accompany you for now. You can find King Kai and the others. At this point, Chu Yukin was ready to get up and leave. She could see that Lu Chen had several bodies, and he would never know fatigue in the future. If she continued like this, her brain would probably be broken. She found that her wrist was pulled by a huge force, and the next moment her body was pressed down on the soft couch. Then she heard Lu Chen's low and magnetic voice, Madam, don't you like places that are too lively? How about we change places? As soon as the voice fell, Lu Chen's main body and Chu Yukin disappeared instantly. The next moment, they appeared in Chu Yukin's bedroom. Seeing Lu Chen's main body alone with her, Chu Yukin was even more scared. Just now in Fenjiayun Palace, there were sisters to share her burden, and she occasionally had some rest time. Now she was alone with Lu Chen's main body, so she was in trouble. Before Chu Yukin opened her mouth to speak, she immediately felt a sense of fulfillment. Chu Yukin had no choice but to let Lu Chen do whatever he wanted. While doing his job, Lu Chen asked Chu Yukin in her ear, Madam, should I call you Yukin or Yunzi? Chu Yukin's brain was startled, and her body tensed instantly, but she quickly reacted. She had long noticed that Lu Chen had discovered the connection between her and the main body. It's just that Lu Chen had always pretended not to know. Chu Yukin was a little puzzled that Lu Chen had always pretended not to know before, so why did he take the initiative to show his cards today? Is it because he has already achieved the Dao Emperor, so he is no longer afraid of the Shenyu Emperor? At this moment, Shenyu Dynasty, the palace. In the Emperor and Empress's bedroom, Chu Yunzi collapsed on the soft couch, with a look of disbelief on her face. Unexpectedly, she was discovered by Lu Chen, and for a moment Chu Yunzi was extremely anxious. What will Lu Chen do next? Lu Chen has now broken through to the Great Emperor realm. With his current strength, he might be able to directly cut off the spiritual connection between her and Chu Yukin. She had caused so much trouble for Lu Chen in order to avenge him. Lu Chen must hate her very much now. When Chu Yunzi thought of the person she loved hating her, she felt a pain like 1,000 arrows piercing her heart. Chu Yukan sighed, lying on the couch, slightly turning her head to look at Lu Chen lying behind her. She is she, I am me, but there is still a trace of spiritual connection between her and me, and she can feel all my feelings. Your Majesty, you should have known the relationship between her and me a long time ago, why did you bring it up now? End of this chapter. Chapter 1025 Lu Chen and number 039, S Revenge. Chu Yukan knew that Lu Chen was going to show his hand, so she stopped pretending. As the bridge of communication between the main body and Lu Chen, Chu Yukan was also tormented. She had long wanted to show her hand to Lu Chen. Lu Chen clasped Chu Yukan's shoulders with his arms in reverse, and said while using the force, "Who?" Of course, it was to take revenge on Chu Yunzi, the vicious woman. Chu Yunzi felt even more uncomfortable when she heard Lu Chen say that she was vicious. She couldn't figure it out now. She loved Lu Chen so much at the beginning, why did she turn love into hatred and take revenge on Lu Chen later? Chu Yukan didn't know what to say at this time. Although she and Chu Yunzi had already cut off, she was Chu Yunzi's second body after all. Without Chu Yunzi, there would be no her. Lu Chen said that Chu Yunzi was vicious, and Chu Yukan felt a little sad in her heart. Lu Chen said that Chu Yunzi was vicious, wasn't he saying that she was vicious? However, when she thought of the things Chu Yunzi had done, Chu Yukan couldn't say anything to refute. She had already prepared herself mentally, and she could accept whatever Lu Chen did to her. After a moment of silence, Chu Yukan said, "Your Majesty, now that things have come to this, if you have anything to say, just tell Yunzi directly. I can let her consciousness temporarily control my body." Lu Chen said with a smile, "Okay." Seeing that Lu Chen agreed, Chu Yukan immediately said to Chu Yunzi through the consciousness connection, "The opportunity you have dreamed of has come. As for whether he will accept you, it depends on you." Although Chu Yunzi was very nervous, she finally chose to control Chu Yukan's body. This day had to be faced, and there was no point in escaping. And she also wanted to know what Lu Chen was thinking at the beginning, why he just didn't want to accept her. She thought she was not ugly, and she was also very talented in cultivation. She was also a relatively outstanding woman in the entire Xia Dynasty, but Lu Chen was always lukewarm to her. After Chu Yunzi completely controlled Chu Yukan's body, the original comfortable feeling became clearer. She had experienced it indirectly through the connection of spiritual consciousness before, but after controlling Chu Yukan's body, it was equivalent to her direct and intimate contact with Lu Chen. Perhaps it was because she did not recover for a while, Chu Yukan's body suddenly softened, and the whole person fell completely on the soft couch. Lu Chen's broad chest also fit completely with Chu Yukan's jade back. Chu Yunzi raised her jade hands and tried to support herself on the soft couch to get up, but she was so weak that she could not get up at all. She had to turn her back to Lu Chen and continue to lie down. She couldn't help thinking that this was good, so she could avoid looking directly at Lu Chen. She really didn't dare to face Lu Chen face to face now. Then Chu Yunzi buried her head in the pillow, waiting for Lu Chen's revenge. Seeing that Chu Yunzi didn't dare to look back at him, Lu Chen leaned over to Chu Yunzi's ear and said, "You vicious woman, you caused me so much trouble back then, how come you don't even dare to look at my face now? Do you know you have no face to face me?" As Lu Chen spoke, he retaliated against Chu Yunzi crazily, and Chu Yunzi gritted her teeth and tried to control herself. At this time, Lu Chen used the 100 birds paying homage to the phoenix and entered the state of cultivation. When he thought of the trouble Chu Yunzi had caused him, Lu Chen became even more angry. Although in terms of the result, the things Chu Yunzi did not have much impact on him, Chu Yunzi did those things against him after all. If the system had not been upgraded in time, I'm afraid his luck and blood power would have been divided up by his descendants. If he really followed the life planned by the Tianyan stone, it would be hard to say whether he could become the emperor now. At this time, Lu Chen said viciously, "If I wasn't the son of destiny, I'm afraid I would have been killed by you." As soon as the voice fell, Lu Chen's revenge came even more fiercely. Chu Yunzi's hair was messy, and her mature and dignified face was full of tears, as if she regretted what she had done. At this time, Chu Yukin's consciousness saw this scene in her body, and she was not only not uncomfortable, but in a good mood. She could see that although Lu Chen was very angry, he did not have the intention to kill Chu Yunzi. Lu Chen probably wanted to make Chu Yunzi his forbidden delicacy and humiliate her in the future. However, this was also the retribution that Chu Yunzi deserved. Perhaps in the near future, Chu Yunzi will serve Lu Chen with her. For the next day and night, Lu Chen was retaliating against Chu Yunzi until Chu Yunzi fainted and Chu Yukin regained control of her body, and Lu Chen stopped retaliating. After Lu Chen felt that Chu Yukin's soul had regained control of her body, he turned her over and looked down at her eyes. Chu Yukin asked tentatively, "Your Majesty? Your Majesty, are you calm now?" Lu Chen chuckled, and then said, "How can it be so easy to calm down? When I catch her true form in the future, that will be the beginning of her nightmare." At this point, Lu Chen raised his hand and gently moved the messy hair on Chu Yukin's jade cheeks behind her ears. "Why did she run away?" Chu Yukin replied, "This is the first time Yunzi has direct contact with your Majesty, and your Majesty is now the Emperor." She couldn't resist for a while and fainted. A sneer flashed at the corner of Lu Chen's mouth. She fainted after only 1 day and 1 night. At this point, Lu Chen stopped messing around. He hugged Chu Yukin's body again, turned over, lay on the soft couch, and let Chu Yukin lie on his chest. Then he stroked Chu Yukin's jade back and said, "After I broke through the Great Emperor, I reshaped my body. I'm afraid my father has already noticed my situation." After hearing what Lu Chen said, Chu Yukin instantly understood why Lu Chen chose to show his hand today. It seems that Lu Chen wanted to find out about the recent situation of the Great Emperor Shenyu through Chu Yunzi. Chu Yukin said, "After you reshaped your body, your original body also died. The Great Emperor Shenyu should have sensed your death through his blood. This may be a good thing." Chu Yukin learned from Chu Yunzi that the Great Emperor Shenyu had given up Lu Chen a long time ago. Even if Lu Chen died, the Great Emperor Shenyu would not care. And Lu Chen's death may be a good thing for the Great Emperor Shenyu. With the ability of the Great Emperor Shenyu, it is impossible for him not to know that Chu Yunzi used the Tianyan stone to target Lu Chen, but he did not stop Chu Yunzi from doing so. This shows that the failure of Lu Chen's trial is what the Great Emperor Shenyu wants to see most. It is obvious that the Emperor Shenyu is worried that Chu Yunzi and Lu Chen will rekindle their old love. After all, Chu Yunzi had always been in love with Lu Chen, and it was the Emperor Shenyu who forced her to marry him back to the Xia Dynasty. Lu Chen said, "I am worried that he knows about my becoming an emperor." Hong Hong sensed that an emperor is approaching the Great Xia Dynasty quickly. "I am worried that the person coming is the Emperor Shenyu." Chu Yukin said, "It should not be him. After you become an emperor, the Emperor Shenyu will lose interest in you. You have already abandoned your original body and the blood of the Emperor Shenyu. The Emperor Shenyu can no longer directly possess you." Hearing Chu Yukin's analysis, Lu Chen felt that there was some truth, but he still planned to find Chu Yunzi to confirm. End of this chapter. Thank you for watching. Continue exploring the fascinating world of Chinese novels with us. Hit that subscribe button on Chinese Novel Audio Wave to stay updated with our latest stories. And never miss out on a great listen.